Hey, what's going on, everyone? Check out what's coming up this week on Legacies.
I want to be clear off the bat. Like, I don't know much about cannabis, and I was like,
I don't have an opinion or something. Yeah, and I'm like, it's not about weed, man.
Our mission is to advance excellence in cannabis nursing practice through advocacy, collaboration, education, research, and policy development.
Who are the guys that you think will be left standing? Who are they?
Share. Who are the guys? Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Legacies. I'm your host, Tom Ritchie, joined, as usual, by Wesley the Wizard Bowles. I'm going to keep on the wizard now. We're getting to the final stretch on our super secret project.
it's nice to know that I have my Halloween costume pre-figured out for me, and I don't have to think about it.
Are you more of a Merlin or a what was the dude's name from?
It's Gandalf. Let's
Gandalf, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. He's in a lot of Shakespearean stuff too, wasn't he?
Ian McKellen or whatever.
Yeah.
He was a huge. I don't know if it's Broadway, but
there's a lot of Freddy Krueger going on AMC right now.
Yeah.
Let's remind everyone that Legacies is powered by Breadstack retailers. It might be time for an upgrade. As a matter of fact, after being to some of the retail websites, I know for a fact it's time for an upgrade. I'm still struggling to find one-to-one. Not that I didn't receive a ton of suggestions, but I spend some of my waking hours trying to find some locally.
Not having any look out there in Woodstock?
None. There's a couple. I shouldn't say that. I did pick up the Orchid by Canera. It's pretty good. I'll be quite honest. I was not impressed by the size of the buds in there. And I get it. I know. CBD flower or one-to-ones are a little bit more finicky. You're not going to get huge nugs off them. But I will say that that's not always the case because our friend, Mr. Jason Schwartz, has Purple Mountain Majesty available on Mendo. And to quote him, he said they look like little dinosaur eggs. And so when I looked at the photos, I'm like, oh boy, I got to get some of that. So I got to order some of that. If you're not signed up for Mendo, this is one of the reasons that Mendo is so accessible for everyone is that sometimes it's just not available to you. And if you have insurance, adjudication. So
nice.
Get on Mendo.
I've been on a glass tip pre-roll.
Yeah, you're so fucking bougie now, bud.
I don't know if I can go back, man. What did I try this week? I've tried 3 or 4. I've tried the one from Tantalus Labs. I don't remember the strain on that. I have to look
relaunch
at
from Atlantic, right?
Yeah, that was really, really good. I had 2 from Third Coast Genetics, the Gold Cash Gold and the Pure Michigan. Both of those were, I think, of the glass tips I've tried so far, definitely my favorites.
Yeah.
I tried one other one, which I know is also Atlantic Cultivation, which was Naked Mummers. Not quite as good to me as the Third Coast Genetics ones, but still out there. Yeah.
But what is
I'm on
it?
A glass,
Is it the glass tip?
Kick.
Is it it's because obviously the flower affects things. And going back to Weejits, I've got to get one of their dupe tubes because there's certain flower. I love the flavor. And I'm like, there's more there, but it's hindered, I think. So according to Michael, it enhances it. So I just need to get some. But I think you're just, so does this mean when we launch our own brand into market, they have to be glass tip pre-rolls?
They might have to be. I'm super enjoying the smoke on them. The pull, the draw, I don't know. They're really nice to me.
I would
really
assume
nice.
that comes with a premium price, but could be worth it. I haven't got one yet. I need to find one.
Especially for the strains we're thinking about doing.
Yeah, I'll get to this. Because I got a surprise for you, which I got super excited about. But anyways, you got super excited this weekend over SpaceX's successful landing or catching of, I don't follow a lot of SpaceX, but dude, you geek out on this stuff. And then when you explained what exactly they had to do, I was like, what? This dude is Tony Stark. There is no fucking doubt about it. He is Tony Stark.
Yeah, it was an incredible weekend. For anyone who didn't see it, they've been testing Starship, which is their latest iteration on their rockets that they're sending to space, and these are the ones that are eventually going to take us to Mars. But they're massive. They're huge. The booster alone's like 1.5 times the size of
Is it like 70 meters or
Statue of
something?
Liberty. The whole thing's like 232, 250 meters, something like that, or 250 feet. Absolutely massive. And this thing's the size of a skyscraper. Anyway, they brought it back, after launching the main payload to orbit, and then landed that thing and caught it with a tower with 2 chopstick arms, landed right in the middle of it. It was
nutty.
incredible.
When I saw it at first, I kind of blew it off because I'm like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, he's landed, boosters and stuff on platforms. But then I'm like, oh, the magnitude, the size, the error for margin, the speed. I thought for sure when it was coming in, it was hitting the fucking. I thought for sure it was coming in and going to hit that tower until those boosters kicked in.
It's like you think, oh, something that size, a skyscraper, I'll slow it down probably 10 minutes before it hits the tower, have some time. No, this thing gets about 100 feet off the ground, then fires its fucking engines and slows down.
Have you seen anyone that's replicated it with like superimposing the size of a skyscraper, like superimpose the booster as a, I see what you mean. Like, you know what I mean? As a skyscraper to show what that would actually look like, because it's very difficult, because obviously cameras and stuff are far away from it. I saw some of the boats in the harbor surrounding it though. Those guys got balls. Like,
oh yeah.
I'm surprised they let anyone, obviously they're not right close to it, but let's face it, a 270 foot or whatever it is booster blows up. That shrapnel's going where those guys are.
Places.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The whole point of it too is the rapid reusability, right?
That
this thing again is the size of, if not just a little bit bigger than the Saturn V rockets that took us to the moon, and those things cost billions of dollars to launch, and
they were disposable, right?
They're completely disposable. Everything, nothing could be reused. So now it's get them back, land, reuse them, but reuse them quickly. That's the point of landing them back on the tower. Is that eventually Elon gets it to the point where they're back on the tower, landed, refueled, and back up there again.
Yeah, so right in that
matter
spot,
of hours.
right? Because otherwise they were landing things on this platform in the ocean, wherever the hell they were doing it. Then they'd have to transfer it back, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And how long would that take? Is that like a couple weeks or a week?
Yeah, that takes about a week, I think. And then they come back, they do the retrofits and repairs and stuff. Plus like that, cost, and send it back out.
Obviously the logistics and everything behind it.
The point of this is like within a couple of hours, they have them refueled, back on the pad, and up again, because he needs to get.
But when are we going to get away from the fossil fuel burn? Like, and we see what we see in Star Wars with like these nuclear generated.
He's not burning any fossil fuels in there.
Oh, well, what the hell is it?
There's no fossil fuels. It's all I believe they're run on methane. What? Methane and hydrogen and all that stuff. There's no. There's no fossil fuels.
Why I'm not a rocket scientist by any means. Excited about hitting the pop-up tomorrow for Buzzkill. OCS's Buzzkill. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the industry are buzz killing it. And we'll see why. I don't know. I'm very interested. We need to follow back up with the OCS and find out what their metrics, I mentioned this yesterday, what their metrics and KPIs to measure the success of this campaign are. And if it was media exposure, which I feel this is a huge PR play, which is in of itself brilliant, right? Because that's what you need to do. Obviously, you can't. The OCS has done some mild advertising to the consumers or the general public before, but if you get mainstream media pickup on this, then it's doing what it's supposed to do, which is informing the consumers. I don't like and I was clear with them as well. I'm not a big fan of the fear mongering, right? Where it's, all weed is, or all illicit weed, or illicit weed is unsafe. Come on. I operated in that side, and I can tell you the care that, I'm not saying everyone, it's not a broad stroke, but the vast majority of those legacy growers take very good care of their plants. And it's not to say that there's good weed, bad weed in both sides of this industry. It just is.
Yeah, and it's tough from a trust perspective for me too, for the OCS to claim things like, with the testing specifically, right? Like illicit weed isn't tested when we know that that's not the case. It is. But also the fact that our weed is tested, and we know how many products come out at 30+%, and they're not 30+.
And there was some good points. Sorry, OCS, not to get on you about it, but there was some very good points made where, when you're putting out product calls 4 times a year and you're accepting in some of these very boastful THC high potency products, that's not doing us any favors in industry, especially me, right? I'm toning it down. By the way, you're getting another bag of After 8 because it's just too hard hitting for me now. It really is.
You got a bag of After 8 flower?
Yeah, I do. and it's coming. It's coming. So I mentioned I got a surprise. So I completely forgot about this. But our friends over at Wyld had sent a care package a while back. And we get a lot of different stuff. I try packing stuff up. So when I see you, I can drop stuff off. By the way, I've got some bread stack gear and whatnot. But I did try these, and I remember trying them. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to mention this. And I forgot. So Wyld, for those that are familiar, as you can see, I've already been to this one. They've got some great gummies. These are, I'm still not the sativa indica hybrid type guy, but these are, marked as sativa, 5 milligrams THC, 10 milligrams CBD, 30. Wait, hold on a second. I got the wrong pack in front of me here. This one's the CBD. Okay. So this one, first let me start with flavor. Wow. Huge. Have you had these before? Have you tried Wyld?
I've had,
gummies?
I think, what's the one in the blue bag? Is that the elderberry or
that's
elder?
Right. Yeah, it's
I've had those.
Huckleberry.
Huckleberry. That's it. Those are delicious.
So and this one's a hybrid. So in the Huckleberry, for everyone to see, 5 milligrams THC, and then the CBD in this one is 0. Well, this one's straight up THC. I haven't tried that one yet. Good thing I didn't accidentally try it. There's certain times of day that I consume. But these ones here, the real fruit blood orange gummies, these ones are like flavor potent, really good. But 5 milligrams THC, but the CBC in it is 15 milligrams in this one. So you get 2. Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed, so they are, let me try and read this again so I get it right. Wyld is a climate neutral certified company.
Nice.
No, that's by TIPA, right? So they do a lot of that certification. You can't go wrong with that. Like, I don't know very many companies. I haven't been paying attention, but I mean, it's prominent on the packaging, which is good. And these are also, I think they're like biodegradable packs. So, but anyways,
those are good. Those are good size gummies from what I remember
they
too.
are.
Because sometimes I've had edibles before you get them, and they're just like these little tiny
little
you feel,
things.
even though it's the same amount of THC, you feel ripped off because it's not.
Well, we'll give Wyld a shout out because flavor great. Love to see CBC in product. You don't see that very often either. I'm not filtering. We need more filters.
What is I don't know much about CBC at all. Actually, do you know what the
It's
general
a calming, relaxing effect? I am not up to speed on that particular cannabinoid. But then, because CBN and CBC are making quite the rise, I think. But it has that calming effect. I'm sure we could find out.
I know CBN's a little more on the sleepy side, right? That's a little bit
from
more
what I understand. Yeah, that's
from
correct.
what I understand too.
Don't get mad at me. I have to chew or close a couple tabs here just to make sure it doesn't mess anything up. Hopefully it refocuses. We're back where we need to be here. I know you don't like me touching my computer, but I sometimes have to. And my phone, apparently.
I meant to ask you. We have our Halloween episode is technically we have an episode on the 30th, I think, which is like we record on the 30th before. Like, are we doing costumes? Do we have to get our guests to do costumes? I feel like we need to. I feel like,
oh my God, can we do that? So we're about to move into a 3-part series in a way. We're talking about clean cannabis and dirty cannabis. And we've got a representative from the American Cannabis Nurses Association on today. And then we move into, I think it's Rad Source and then Autumn Brands, right? So all within the context of what the issues are, how we deal with it, and companies that are operating within it. So question would be, would those guests be open to such? Am I open to such? I'm not afraid of it. I think most of the times I take the easy route and I throw on a mask of some sort. Yeah. Let's see what we can come up with. Maybe it might make sense.
Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah. Finally you recall when we were at Can Exec Summit, we were talking to Scott Swale, who is Boveda, and he shared some really interesting information. I don't know if you caught the email this morning, but we've been trying to just regroup on it. He shared some information that was actually startling about the concept behind humidity packs, and they got them not themselves into trouble, but there was a time where they were taking some massive hits because there was false information, misleading information in the through Reddit and whatnot. And when we found out how and why, that was quite interesting. We'll get Scott on the show here coming up, but not today. But I'll just point out one of the things that kind of pissed me off as we were talking about Boveda, and I'm like, oh, humidity packs. Yeah, you guys should be doing this for guitars and all this stuff. And I'm like, he went through some of the companies they work with, and I'm like, I didn't get one.
And your Taylor?
And my Taylor. And I'm like, it wasn't a cheap guitar. Like, what the fuck? And you're like, oh, the music shop probably took it out when they shipped it to you. I'm like,
I have no doubt.
Why would they do that?
No doubt.
Why would they do such a thing?
Yeah, if I worked at those music stores, because you get to unbox them at the store, right? Like,
well, you got to check it out before it gets shipped.
Yeah, you got to check it out and stuff like that. So yeah, I imagine those come out and get stored at. Yeah.
Anyways, we managed to finally. Scott's always traveling. So, and here's the thing. Talk about power of intent. I'm thinking this morning at the exact same time his email came back into me. I'm like, oh, I got to follow up with Scott. Bam, his email's in the inbox, and I'm like, well, okay, not coincidence by any means. But anyways, did I mention that? So when we had Mike Downey on, he mentioned the book that the HIP was bringing out.
Yeah, It's Our Life, right? That's what it's called.
Right. Yeah. This is our life. I forgot to mention that I ordered this and it came, and I had set it aside. I knew I had it. You can get this on the HIP website. You can get it on Amazon. I suggest going to the HIP site, but dude, I broke it in, so it's a hardcover.
That's a coffee table book if I ever saw one.
It is 100% coffee table book. For HIP fans out there, you have to have this book. I think I don't know how I screwed up. I must have missed the pre-order. I think there was, for the first 100, they got maybe a t-shirt or something like that. There was a special bonus, but regardless, we know what the HIP has done over the years. They've been super supportive of a ton of different charities. I'm not saying any of the proceeds of this book go to any, but chances are some is going to go to one of the Downey foundations or something like this. But such a great book. I love a big, beefy book to get into. Yeah. And it's filled with, there's set sheets and ticket stubs and, stage and set designs and come on. I'll see you later. I'm going to read.
Yeah, that's a nice size book. Yeah.
So anyways, for those that like the HIP, 100% you need to check that out. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out the interview we did with Mike Downey. That's getting a ton of traction.
Getting some views for anyone who wants to look it up. Just search no dress rehearsal on YouTube, or check out our profile. But it's there. It was
really
a
great interview. Not because I did it, not because we did it, but it was great. I always look at these, and when we have these conversations, it's like I'm envisioning we're just sitting down, having a coffee, shooting the shit, talking about challenges.
I liked when we first talked to Mike, and he said, I want to be clear off the bat, I don't know much about cannabis. Yeah. And I was like,
I don't have an opinion or something. Yeah. And I'm like, it's not about weed, man. It doesn't have to be about weed. Tell the legacy here.
Yeah.
So we're going to meet up tomorrow. I've got a ton of different stuff for you. I've got boxes and I've got Wyld product. Maybe we can get together with Jazz as well. We'll bring Jazz in. Speaking of Jazz, the Elevate Cannabis Retailer Summit is coming up November 12th. Brands, great opportunity to get your products in front of retailers, category managers, buyers, managers, and bud tenders as well. But this event is geared towards retailers, and there will be panels. I've graciously accepted moderating a panel. At first, I think he wanted me to speak to it. I'm like, dude, I don't operate in the retail space. I can't speak to it. I know some of the challenges, obviously, but I'm just regurgitating. I'm happy to moderate. I like doing that a lot. So anyways, it's going to be a great event. Check it out. Reach out to Jazz. You can hit us up if you want. We'll make sure that you've got an opportunity to participate as a brand. But incredible opportunity. I don't know how many are coming this time. They're usually massive.
Yeah, well, if it's like his last event, it's going to be successful. It was great events there. I love going to that place.
Oh, it's an awesome space. And the food, I think you just get all worked up thinking that the food's going to, and I think there is food. There'll be food.
Yeah, that was a wild meal last time.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
You get, well, listen.
Is the Tether holiday market that same week?
Tether holiday market is in Dundas. That is November. See how good my fucking recall is. November 6th. November 6th, Dundas. Check that out. Tether holiday market. We're going to try and be there as well. Katie Pringle, Marigold PR, obviously, and team. She has an incredible team, but they're also doing, I almost said Violent Femmes. What a great band. Radical Femmes, which I think is Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver. See how good my recall is. I don't know if that's accurate, but check that out as well. Looking forward to the holiday market. Looking forward to the Elevate Retailer Summit. That's going to be awesome. Yeah, it's just nice to get together with people. I'm so work at home, everything, you know.
I know.
And I've even been switching it up. And I go up and sit with boys as much as I can, and yeah, boys being the dogs. My kids are older. They're all in school and doing their own thing now.
Leaving the nest. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, today's episode is going to be interesting because I've been thinking about this quite a bit. We've got Lucas Jarzem on. You know, he's got Good to Grow. He's got a ton of it. He's just super connected. But I love where his business model came from. And in some cases, you know, so he obviously works with companies. And I was thinking about Crystal Cure this morning. Jonathan had a great post on, you know, they've got their revocation back. So license is officially revoked. Now they need to work on just tearing everything down and moving that stuff. And I'm thinking the whole time, I'm thinking Lucas. Like Lucas helps these companies with finding buyers for equipment, office wear, like whatever it might be. And if you look at only the one side of that happening, you can see a negative undertone, like it's shitty, you know, a company, you know, didn't make it due to a number of different issues. But then when you look at the positive side, these companies that are acquiring that, they're not all new licenses. They're not, right? So they're expanding. So let's just remember before we get too hard on the industry, too hard on the negative side of things, that everything in life expands and contracts. It just continues to do this, right? And our industry coming up on 6 years tomorrow, also the passing date of Gord Downey, which is another anniversary. The industry will continue to do this for quite some time. There'll be a ton of expansion. We see certain individuals like to jump on, look at this company, they're not performing well. Oh my God, they lost this much money. Fuck, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But then you have an individual where, you know, I think Lucas's business model, at least the one business, was born out of supporting, because they still need support. They still need support. They need to be able to move this equipment somewhere. And it's not just at a fire sale price, right?
Right.
To be able to pull the capital back in and, you know, in some cases pay their excise taxes back to the CRA and settle those accounts. But I just love seeing problem presented, solution, and then a company is born from that. So anyways, we'll have him on. We're going to have Nicole on from the American Cannabis Nurses Association as well. Help us understand, you know, dude, I think about this a lot and I'm like everything's tested, but then I go back to there's lab shopping, right? And
yeah,
do we 100% know? So we do know that, you know, when OCS was doing their sampling, like pulling product and testing it, they were testing for potencies, right? We know that. But are they retesting for heavy metals, you know, botrytis? Like, are they doing that? Because if you're shopping lab results to get a higher potency potentially, what if it's not passing, right? And that technically needs to be irradiated in some cases or e-beamed or however they're doing it. Are they buying that too and just pushing that product to market? Like, I don't know. Presents an issue. Obviously, if this is an issue that continues, what we don't want, we need to figure this out ourselves is what I'm saying within the industry, because if it comes from Health Canada down, then that's a problem. They're just going to be overbearing. You got to do this, and it's just going to add more complexity to the system. It's going to add more cost to the system. I do know that there's organizations and not-for-profits that are tackling this, and we've got Peter on next week from CSAC, although we're changing that. I think the acronym it's weird. It almost sounds dirty. But anyways, we'll discuss that because obviously there's a need for this. There's standardization that needs to happen, but we always like to look at the echo from the US, like what's going on there. And we know not federally legal, although Kamala is now saying, yeah, we're going all in. We're going to federally legalize cannabis. Do you buy that? Oh, I saw the eye roll. So
listen, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a political play, and that's really it. I don't think it's someone who truly believes in that. I think would have made that a campaign statement from the beginning. I don't know. I think it's a popularity thing.
Just look at all the tax revenue.
And to be fair to, I feel like even when Trump says that now, I feel the same thing.
Well,
I feel
both
like
the same way. Yeah,
it's a token piece to be played with to gain popularity at this point. Neither of them started running their campaigns based on that. It wasn't a huge ticking point. So
Trudeau and the Liberals jumped right on it here in Canada, and I still feel very strongly that is what helped usher him in. Now, was it for his own purposes? Look what I did. Now I can smoke. I don't know. But it was successful. I mean, that was a huge platform to be on, right? Cannabis, especially at a time where, the MMPR became the ACNPR. Now we're looking at reform. What is that going to look like as they frame up the cannabis regs? So yeah, I think it's just lip service. I think they'll say that. They may get strongly behind it. Obviously that's going to cause a ton of voter turnout in favor. And who knows how far down the line they'll kick the ball. I still don't let the states figure it out themselves in each independent state. Give more guideline. We see what's going on here in Canada because of that. Even though we have a federal framework, there's still issues at the provincial level that I think Health Canada probably could have solved with a little bit more guidance or guidelines. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying more regulation. I'm not saying more line items on the fucking regs, because that's just...
But leaving it to the states is going to cause...
Yeah, I think it's going to cause some issues.
Same issues we've got now, where you got to have a distribution center in every single area, and it's things like that, right?
The excise stamps. This one is going to be huge to me. We were talking about it yesterday with Ian even, and the cost, I forget who's leading that. Is it the CCX or someone? I forget who it is. They put out a describer video, one of those things that show, so what happens is, for those that don't know, although I'm sure most of you do, if I'm a cannabis company that is shipping my boxed SKUs to Ontario, they don't sell very well. The retailers don't pick them up. They get an RTV from OCS back to me. Now, if that product is a product that doesn't need to be repackaged or destroyed, I have to change the excise tax, because now, maybe BC wants it, or maybe Alberta wants it. Now I have to remove all the excise stamps and send them back out and put the proper and appropriate excise stamp on it. To me, it just seems like just destroy the product.
And even though the government already knows, they already know all this stuff.
According to Jonathan Wilson, they already know, because he has firsthand account and evidence that they knew. So he's like, well, if you know, why do I need to report on it?
He also had stamps missing from his fresh roll of stamps from the government.
Right. Well, and if you look at the very early days, I think I'd shared the story before. I think it might have been Aurora. I forget who it was. They were using the glue sticks that we used as not the stick roll up, but like the gel glue. And manually, when those first came out, they came out in stacks. They had an elastic around them. They were guarded with your life, because if you lost one at the time, it was like $30 penalty per stamp. So anyways, there was no methodologies to applying these, and there still is not in some cases, depending if you got funky packaging, right? So I think, I got excited. Last night I found some more Clemenco 1-to-1 fresh jar.
Nice.
Anyway, so when they're getting applied, I don't think there's always manufacturing equipment that allow you to put this on, depending on the type of. So imagine removing now. Let's just see what happens here. So I've just received all my product back from the OCS that did not move, that they said, you got to have this high potency product. It's going to sell off the shelves. So now I've got you ain't getting them off, right? And we know this is happening because they have to remove them and put the proper or appropriate excise stamp on it. It's just,
I'm getting frustrated just watching you.
And I'm not exaggerating, like trying to get this off. Like, oh, look at me, I'm a monkey fucking a football. It does not. Yeah.
I think my favorite thing from Jonathan's post was the fact that they made him take the extra stamps out to the back in a metal bucket and burn them.
It's so reminiscent. One day we need to go through all of the crazy early day you remember having to weigh the root masses?
Oh yes.
And we're like, well, one, it was all your defoliated material. So as a reformed grower, I'm like, no one's fucking grabbing that and smoking it, guys. Like it's waste. It's literal waste. But the weighing of the root masses, because you remember we had to have the technology developed to be able to account for that in destructions. And you remember when we had to develop destructions, and I'm like, this is fucking ludicrous. Like what they are asking.
Then you had people doing one massive destruction lot for so many things, and then you had some people doing the tiniest little destruction lots for like.
Yeah, I remember some facilities, they'd have, a bucket in each, and they're weighing the bucket and they're tearing them out, and then they'd scan the scales because we had that integration, and I'm like, what a waste. I'm not going to say it, but it's craziness. Because operations it's ingrained in me, and I'm just looking at inefficiencies and ridiculousness. But anyways, looking forward to having Lucas on. He's going to join us in a couple minutes. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're joined by Lucas Jarzem of fucking ton of companies, but resell cannabis equipment, number one. Lucas, thanks for joining Legacies, buddy. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, Tom. I'm doing great. It's a cold day in Montreal.
I was going to ask, how is the weather in Montreal? Because I'm getting older and I'm so inquisitive about the fucking weather these days.
It's all the small talk, my man. It's all the small talk.
But it's everything is controlled by that now. It's like, I got to do this. Nope, too cold. Oh, it's raining. Oh, it's snowing, which is coming soon enough. And by the way, I don't know how into the Tragically Hip you are, but Montreal is becoming one of my favorite Tragically Hip song, which was a lost track when they were recording Road Apples. Anyways, I go on Hip forever.
Is one of my favorite songs ever made.
I'm going to text you I'm going to text you a video. My buddy sent me the other day. It's a fucking satirical skit about, I'll send it to you. I'll text it to you.
Amazing.
Anyways, we've connected, a couple times. We saw you at CanExec, huge supporter of the industry. You're obviously very connected and trying to help people, I think is the main thing. Even ourselves, very gracious with that. But so I want to get into your lead into the industry, but I'm very curious for you to share how resell cannabis equipment came up and we talked about this a little bit on our the pre-show, which is, you see equipment has to be resold. It means, a company shut down, they may be in CCAA bankruptcy, they're closing shop, and that's the negative side. But on the same side, there's expansion and there's contraction. In this case, we're talking expansion where you're helping these individuals resell their equipment and bring it to a potentially expanding or new licensee. So we'll get into that. And, you were at the CanExec, you opened with the first panel, which was State of the Industry. And you were joined by a couple individuals that were also there. I think, who was it that moderated? Was it
Jay McMillan?
Jay McMillan, right. Uber Green, right? So anyways, let's talk about how you got in, where this business need came from. Because I think it was accidental at first, right?
So, a little bit of a backstory there. I got into a large LP by accident because I was with a technician for a service business, and they couldn't drive their vehicle because they needed a breathalyzer and they were using a rental car. So they asked me to drive it.
Can you blow this for me? Say what?
Yeah. So, all the rental cars don't have breathalyzer, right? So we were borrowing a rental car. And I always found that out halfway through the drive when I put two and two together with the previous incidents that the guy had. And so I walk into this large LP, and obviously one of the largest, and no one, or really no one, one of the guys pulls me over, great guy at the company, like, hey, come with me. We walk about half a kilometer, massive place. And they're like, we have all this stuff that we want to sell. I'm like, oh, fantastic. And then I go, just this? It's like, no, come with me further. And then we go through about an acre of equipment.
Jeez.
And they're like, yeah, we want to sell all this equipment. And we started with an Excel spreadsheet where we were just taking pieces of equipment with basic information and had a repertoire of photos that go with it. And and then we matched those things and sent them to people, and they were allowed to make offers. And we started this business, resell Canada equipment based off the fact that you can sell and buy on consignment with no additional fees. We make a markup on the consignment section of it, so we mark up to the buyer. The seller receives exactly what they're asking for. The seller regularly the equipment and puts it on stands, make sure it's ready to ship, and the buyer pays for ship. So with that type of format, pretty transparent. It's as transparent as you can get to buy used equipment with an intermediary. And so we integrate, and at this point, we're the largest used equipment marketplace in Canada for cannabis, dedicated to cannabis products. We then use that as not just a business, but also a lead generator or a packaging business, which we pivoted over Good to Grow, which was originally an equipment reselling. And that's now a packaging business for the cannabis industry. So helping with recurring revenue streams. But yeah, together they synergize pretty well with one another. I didn't like paying for leads. I didn't like paying for ads. I mean, I like supporting guys like Brandy, yourselves, Joey, other guys in the industry. It's a very different thing than paying for recurring advertisement. And if you can find a value add for a lot of these businesses and generate leads that way, I think it's a win-win.
Yeah. You're at an interesting inflection point there, right? Because you're dealing with a company that's potentially shutting down, and yet you're dealing with a company that's firing up. What's that like? Because I could just imagine, like, are you playing psychologist a little bit as well in some cases? Like, you know,
Absolutely.
this is what, so, and the reason I ask that and say that is you've got this interesting perspective where you're almost at the front line of understanding, because I would have to assume they're not waiting until bankruptcy, we're closing up shop completely. They're, you know, at least sophisticated operators are going to be, okay, we've got, you know, $3 million in equipment here. We can't fire sale it. We could list it and just throw it out there. And then, God, you know, we're not going to find the best match. Someone's going to come in, offer us pennies on the dollar. What is that experience like for you with dealing with, you know, we've got a huge asset inventory log here. We've got to be able to move this. What's that like?
There's a couple of formats to bankruptcy that I've seen. The first is categorized, I think, into two segments. One is planned and the other one's unplanned. So we've seen a couple of planned bankruptcies in order to shed weight or shed debt, shed CRA, shed whatever excise tax that they might have. And that's a lot more strategic. You know, they plan the bankruptcy, they know what's going on, they buy back the company without the debt, and they move on. Like playing Super Mario and having 3 lives, you know, and it goes on. And I've seen companies now that they had their second plan bank, they're on their 3rd life. And there are companies out there.
What?
In this space.
Okay.
Yeah. So whether it's through acquisition or a full-on just a CCAA and rebuy, there's GMC, I think it's GMC. So Galaxy went bankrupt, GMC, James E. Wagner went bankrupt. Galaxy bought it. Galaxy went bankrupt. I think Galaxy is now coming out of CCAA. So they're on their 3rd. I mean, technically, GMC Wagner is on their 3rd life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's a bit different. It's a brand acquisition, but it's a similar concept. So that's planned. And again, that's not to say that whoever's running it now is, you know, great at what he does. It's just that's, I think, the shock thing that they went through, and those are the decisions that they made, given the circumstances that they were, and then whoever is left with the bag and making the last decision. So you're playing with the cards that you're dealt in that the industry you're in. So that's the first segment. Second segment is unplanned, and it's where we are a lot more. I guess there's a lot more involved. We're a lot more involved in those situations because in the planned, you're not usually selling your equipment. You're continuing the operations of the business in one segment or another. So the unplanned then breaks down into several categories. One is by default, you have a trustee coming into play, and the trustee is selling assets in a limbo state. The first goal that I've seen is to sell the asset completely. So that means the business, the assets associated, business and brand, the assets associated with it, and then also any leftover inventory that they might have, so cannabis inventory. And the way that trickles down is they'll sell the brand and the cannabis inventory first, then the equipment assets, and then the building. So you'll see that order. And if they can't get an offer on the total package, they'll then go to the asset down. So we deal with that. So we'll deal with our involvement with the trustee. Whereas when the trustee comes in, they act as an intermediary to make sure that there's no foul play involved in selling those assets back. And in the client situation, the bid from the previous owner has to be larger than the other bid, right?
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's how that functions. When we were talking about applying CCAA, it's not illegal if you are outbidding everyone else who's bidding on the asset in the business. So it's the same thing there. And then we'll deal with small insolvencies where you got a micro producer, a mom and pop shop. That's probably the saddest thing that we've unfortunately have to deal with is, something that I'm close to or like very good friends with who sunk their life savings into a business and have to start from scratch, sadly, and whatnot. And in situations like that, we'll try and help them as much as we can to try and reap as much capital as they put into the business.
Yeah.
And I think the age-old adism that it's only worth what someone's willing to pay. I mean, that's the truth.
That's everything. That's real estate. That's cars. It doesn't matter what it is. Yeah,
exactly. And if they're willing to pay more, fantastic. But if they're willing to pay less, that's people are willing to pay. More people that you have eyes on certain things, the more that people are willing to spend. Obviously, so given. As I said, you have the breakdown of the plan and the unplanned, and you have the breakdown of the large businesses where you have trustees involved, and the smaller businesses where you don't necessarily have a trustee involved. And then between, even in the large businesses, that's with the bankruptcy situation. But if people have a graveyard of assets, they'll want to try and remove that for warehousing space and some cash flow. So that's essentially where we sit between those segments.
Yeah. So I'll save the full vert question about when we get closer to state of the industry, because I want you to kind of recap that. But so 2 questions. Is there a large amount of inventory currently sitting in market just because of the various CCAAs and bankruptcies going on? Have you seen a rise in that? And what is the most sought after piece of used equipment?
So to answer your first question, absolutely. And I'm sure that's, if you had to take a stab at it, you'd say yes. There's a lot more sellers than there are buyers for equipment. That's not to say that, and there's a wide variety of different reasons, right? I mean, getting a line of credit from a financial institution for a cannabis business is almost impossible. There are certain banks that will lend, but imagine, you want to go start up a restaurant, you want $50,000 for a line of operating credit, here you go, no problems, no questions asked, and the company goes bankrupt. I mean, bankers are here. But if you ask to that with a cannabis business, it's every coop you can imagine. And even for myself, I was offered a line of credit, and because I didn't sign certain documentation, and our company has no debt, 0 debt on the books, they were willing to give me a line of credit. We sell products to many different industries, not just the cannabis industry. So anyways, given those remarks, so much legalese and legal tape associated with legalese that you have to jump through and sign, and legal tape, again, the same thing with restrictions to get a line of credit. So getting that operating cash flow is, especially at this point in the industry, with no financing from or involvement with any private lenders or private family-run operations for investments, small PE firms, is next to impossible. I can't.
Yeah.
So if you're not profitable at this point, you're able to make some money. And again, like all these private businesses that are saying they're making money hand over fist, there's not a ton of them. There's some that are saying that. It's if you're looking at the public segment and going, okay, well, like, I don't know how you're doing this, because every other public business is not really making any money. They're doing well. Best run business in the cannabis industry is a profitable, next to profitable cannabis. So if that's if that's like the barrier, that's your top price, that not you're making adjustments and that's your ceiling. Well, I mean, how much better can you be as a private entity? It can't be that much. It can't be 300, 400, 500% better. It's just very unlikely. It might be possible. It's, very low threshold of likely. So to answer your question, yes, absolutely. There's a lot more inventory available than there was before. I think your second question is the most sold pieces of equipment.
Most sought after, yeah.
Yeah, so I would say either a vape filling machine, a tabletop vape filling machine, or a tabletop pre-roll machine. So those are probably the two most sought after pieces of equipment, just because they capture both the microprocessing range and some large-scale processors, and cultivation companies will want those things. And I'd say more so like a Knockbox or Knockbox 100 is like the most sought after piece of equipment. We can sell those all day, every day. If you have a Knockbox 100, please hit me up if you want to sell. Absolutely.
I need more inventory.
Yeah, no shade there.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me wonder, so I'll lead into this because I want to get into, there was some remarks and I'm not going to repeat them, but I want your input from the panel that you were on with the state of the industry. But so that, shifting into that, does full vert make sense this day and age, right? Because I think in the early days, we saw these grandeur plans. We're going to do full vert. We're going to do everything in-house. We're going to grow it. We're going to pack it. We're going to, bucket, trim it, pre-roll it. We're going to make vapes. We're going to just, distillate here, and we're doing hash over here. But then the vast majority of the companies that I see under CCAA, at least this is what I see, and I'm not as close to it as you are, but these are the full vert companies. They're the ones that went all in. They are going to be servants to every master. And does that fare well for them in the long run?
See, I think it's a risk tolerance and a risk capability. So can you execute on your business considering the risk associated with the rollout plan? I'll give you a very good example. Where does vertical integration work very? My favorite example is Atlanta Cultivation in Newton. They have the stores there in the province. They have the majority of the store. Yeah,
but you're talking a bit of a unicorn here with Atlanta, right? And that's okay. So let's say to the audience, like, this is like Chris and team, like they are dialed in, and we see the success. So sorry to interrupt, but
no. I think Chris and team, absolutely. There are a couple of people that are doing it. And I'll give you some more examples as well, but that's one set aside. We don't have to continue on that.
No, I would, because some don't understand that there is a definite advantage when you can have retail as well.
Exactly. And it's not just retail; they own the space out.
Right.
So if someone came and rolled up some stores over there, they would die, wouldn't survive. It's a very different. I mean, you can open up as many again, given the restrictions by the Ontario government, but you can open up 6 stores in bumfuck nowhere, Ontario, and on the same block, and where the capacity required is at the store. So that being said, I think they've managed to vertically integrate with almost a monopoly on rollout on the dispensary side, on the B2C, B2B, B2C, all the way out. So that being said, I think that's a different situation. Then you have guys like Canara is a very good example, where they had extraction on site, cultivation, not to the full extent of a vertical integration. But as I said, I think the question is where are you completely vertically integrated, and through which segment? If it's cultivation, extraction, how efficient are you on those dollar per used, dollar out on your cultivation and extraction? And if I had to choose to run a business today, would I vertically integrate anything? Absolutely not. I would stay as lean as possible. I'd probably run a brand, and try and segments up from every sector. I.e., if I was planning to run vapes, I would toggle 4 or 5 different businesses and then move terms between them to roll out my brand with as little capital as possible. I know that's kind of crazy, but you know, the dollar value of marketing injection that you can really establish in this industry is so low. You know, you're relying on sales agents to go move your products. If you're focusing on one jurisdiction, i.e., one province, with a small enough brand, nimble enough, not in terms of dollar value spent on sales, but in terms of like the amount of products that you're launching, or the amount of risk you're taking on, you can be successful. But it's just a matter of mitigating risk, right? If you're fully vertically integrated and you're assuming a massive growth year over year, and that doesn't happen, and that leads to the failure of your business, it's probably not a smart idea in the first place. It doesn't matter if it's this industry. It can be any industry. If I decided today that I want to open up 15 retail stores, and I go, Tom, why don't you be my partner? Let's open up retail stores across Montreal. You'd be like, no, you're a fucking idiot. Like, what's wrong with you? We're not doing that. We're going to lose all our money because no one shopped retail. And it's not to say that it would be impossible to do. Maybe we choose a certain segment and go, hey, we've got to open up luxury stores. They don't exist in Montreal. And you're going to focus on that area specifically because it doesn't exist. Maybe that'll be successful. But the idea of let's just vertically integrate for no reason, and hope to lower costs and growth of our share of the market, because we'll grow so quickly, we're going to be able to roll out all these products that we vertically integrated completely. Doesn't sound very smart. You're not protecting your downside.
But is that a reflection of the early days immaturity of the operators coming in? And not saying that they're immature, don't get me wrong, some were great business operators, but that entire thought process, and I know Health Canada didn't help this much, right? But coming in and going, yeah, okay, in order to be successful, we've got to do everything in-house. We're going to grow it. We've got, you know, hybrid greenhouses, or, you know, our costs, or we've got a cogen, you know, cost per gram is going to be much lower than they're estimating. I wonder if it's hurt immaturity when it comes to understanding, but also, you know, we're dealing with a new industry in a way. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know where to go. Because you say like Canara, right? Canara's been criticized before, and love Nico and these guys. Like, they're awesome, Scott. But they get criticized. They're like, they have too many SKUs in market, and they've got Nugs, and they've got Tribal, and they've got Orchid, and then they've got SKUs across every single one of those categories. And I think, yeah, but that's how you do it if you're going. If that's how you do it if you're going to do it, because one, you want. Let's not forget, we operate in a market or industry that is heavily regulated when it comes to marketing. So then, you know, you want to have SKUs across various categories just for mind share.
Yes,
mind share alone. Does it mean that all stay in market? No, not necessarily. But it's going to give you that. If I'm walking around in those smart retailers that have displays, maybe I can't touch it, but they have displays, I'm seeing tribal, nugs, right? So I'm getting that mind share, because really that's all we have right now in this industry is mind share, right? Because we're not getting pamphlets to our door. There's nothing in the flyers. There's nothing online unless you're in an age-gated community. And the vast majority of companies have said, fuck it, it's impossible. There's no sense to do online advertising, even though they can in some areas. So for me, I just look at it as, if you have the bandwidth and the resources to do it, and we know, you know, Canara has done well. I think they're one of the front runners in the industry, especially as a pubco. Do it. But for others, I would say if there's hesitancy, don't even fucking think about it. Like, if you don't have the capital, you don't have the smarts, the internal teams to be able to do it, and the support network beyond just the nucleus of your business operations, you're doomed. You're just doomed. So with that, we get the thoughts on vertical. Let's talk about the panel, state of the industry. One, recap what it was for the audience. And then I want to give you an opportunity to speak to maybe questions that weren't asked, right? Because we know the way that moderated panels can sometimes work, and it'll drive the conversation in a certain direction. But I want to give you that opportunity to speak to something or an area that just wasn't covered.
I just want to add one thing about the verticals that we're discussing. I think there's two other segments in terms of vertical integration. One is export, and the other one's on the medical platforms.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I think, you look at MTL Cannabis, Abimedics, and you look at some of these privates that are exporting a large volume of cannabis, and it's just a profit margin increase on some of these other businesses where ACNA has developed the brand. You know, if you have one SKU that fails, then you can pick up another SKU and run with that. So anyways, I just want to fill that gap.
Yeah.
All right.
MTL, by the way, love Michael.
Great guy.
Super smart as well. And part of, I think, the success that we see with MTL is just that leadership down culture, right? Is super supportive, always available, right? And willing to help. So we see successes from that. So
Mike was on the panel, right? So
that's right. Yeah.
So I think part of the, it was me, Jay, and Mike, and most of the panel, we were discussing, businesses that are successful, businesses that are dying, what they're doing successfully, what they're doing to be, that lead them to a CCAA. And then we were looking at different events that could create more bankruptcies to follow. So I mentioned legalization in the US. Again, people can take that one way or the other. And then, and I think it's two different segments here. The legalization in the US is one thing, and then importation into Canada. So whenever that fully legislated. So we discussed some of those pivotal events. We also made mention of, some of the businesses that were successful and unsuccessful, and some of the operations, how people are operating lean. Actually, what are they doing to raise? How are they raising? I discussed that briefly, but mainly on, making very smart decisions and being nimble. That's what some of these other businesses were. Is that a fair recap?
I think that's a fair recap. And I'll point out that, so what was it? Who was from High Tide on that panel? The CFO? Omar. Yeah. So Omar. He had joined, and, love them or hate them, we see that lean and nimble, and I look at a High Tide and from a business operations and success standpoint, I go, wow, like, holy shit. But at the same time, there's this shift in this industry, and the numbers aren't representative of it yet, because we see that the Canna Cabanas and some of these other operating stores, they're doing well, but they're starting to lose share over the indies, right? And I don't know if it's, consumers are just going better selection, or I'm finding the craft at these indies, whatever it might be. But what were some of the key highlights that Omar pointed out that you would challenge?
See, I think it's really easy. Again, they've done a fantastic job, but it's really easy to see the rest of the kingdom from the top. You know what I mean? It's really easy to look over and see, okay, like, everyone else should be doing exactly what we are doing to be successful. It's like, that's not a market share even that. Where I've seen some success on some of these independents with, in terms of what he's saying, is more brand synergies with LPs. I've seen a lot of those go really well. So dispensaries work hand in hand with producers, develop a brand for those dispensaries. It's a lot easier to sell the product when your bud tenders are trying to sell your own product. Right. I mean, you'd think, and I think the reason why this didn't go so well with vertically integrated businesses is the onus was on, say, a larger player to roll it out to the dispensaries. And because with the large businesses, a lot of them were siloed, right? A didn't talk to B, didn't talk to C. So Tokyo didn't say, I think Canopy owned Tokyo with Smoke.
Yeah,
am I
that's
wrong
right.
there?
Yeah,
so Canopy didn't speak to Tokyo Smoke. Maybe there wasn't enough synergies in those discussions. I think when the onus is on the dispensary saying, this is your brand, this is under your name, and your product, there's a lot more emphasis to roll that product out on their beat. And I don't know the legality with all that, but I'm sure
it's a fine line depending on which province you go to as well, right? So from the regulations at the Cannabis Act level, there's certain gray areas that are yet to be defined. But then you get into the provincial level, which is, where's head office versus where am I established, and what products do I own as an LP, and how am I pushing them and moving them? And then you get into the whole, well, there's the data deal over here, but then, technically it's not, because we're doing spiffs and riffs over here. So it's jumbled, for one. But so let's bring it back for a minute to, because you mentioned, opportunities, obviously, with state of the industry. Wes and I touched on this, I think, for the last couple episodes with the elections coming. Kamala Harris is now all in on weed, right? Well, we're going to federally legalize weed. And I mean, this, I was with ACNA, so, MJ Freeway and all the customers there, Curaleaf, Clever Leaves, you name them. And they've got their own shitstorm of trouble down there. But would Canada, we've got such an abundance and things to figure out. Do you think with federal legalization happening, if it happens in the US, do you see an import opportunity? Do you think that's going to happen? Or would Canada say, I mean, fuck, no one has a crystal ball. Who knows, one, who will be in, government power at the time for Canada? But do you see that as an opportunity where, because right now, brand wants to come from the US, we've seen Jeter's come in. Cookies obviously had a certain amount of success as well, but those are just the brands. And that's what so many, at least the general consumer or the Canna Curious, fail to realize. You may have tried that in Cali. Great. But it's not the same cannabis. It is literally the brand, maybe the genetics in some cases, right? If they have the DEA clearance and they can get the genetics across the border. But otherwise, I mean, if it was me, I'd go, whoa, nope, we're not bringing any other cannabis in. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. Humboldt, love it. Don't care. We've got enough. But will that create chaos in our market if they federally legalize? Because we already know that there's certain predatory companies that would come in and be all over it, even without import-export opportunity.
Yeah, I think long term, we've seen it in pharma. There's going to be MRAs, mutual recognition agreements, put into place. The biggest question is when. You will have to allow. Canadian government can only hold off the import-export into the industry for so long. Now, I think we've talked about this, but there's two things that I think will be really bad for the Canadian industry. One is federal legalization in the U.S., and the other one is an import-export, import into Canada. Now, I think federal legalization into the U.S. will lead to importation into Canada, but in terms of investment taken away from the Canadian cannabis industry and moved towards the American industry, that's where that discussion. How many private equity investors are looking now in turn to shift, especially American ones, away from Canada into the U.S., especially if they're allowing export out of the U.S., especially because your cost of production will be lower overall. That, again, depends on what the export legislation out of the U.S. and what other countries change their import legislation to be.
But because what drives the cost of production lower in the U.S.? What's going to drive that? So,
one, the regulatory around foreign workers. So how cheap is your labor going to be? And two is the regulatory around what is required to produce cannabis. Now, we have very stringent regulatory requirements. We
were just talking earlier about the early days weighing root masses.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's different. It's more stringent and different in other countries than it is Canada. But that compounded with the taxation structure in Canada creates a much higher cost of production. It doesn't matter how much automation you have, you still have these taxation floors that you have to pass through, these hoops that you have to pass through. Now, if those don't exist in Southern America, where you can get another grow season or two, you're competing against one, weather and temperature, and then two, taxation, which then increase your price for of what your price production, right? So then the U.S. will be cheaper than Canada, and then you're kind of cut off from the rest of the world. So one is funding. We already have a hard enough time to find funding. A lot of American investors come up to Canada to invest into the cannabis industry, expecting there to be legalization in Canada. And two is exportation. So now Canada's pretty much alone. There are some other countries involved, but pretty much alone in exporting high-grade cannabis to other jurisdictions, other countries. If the U.S. comes and joins that dogfight, it's going to do two things. It's going to drive the price per gram in those jurisdictions that you're importing into, i.e. Canada to Germany, Canada to October, and down. And then secondly, you're not going to be able to compete, right? your price per gram is going to go to a point where, hey, you're making negative margin according to a certain jurisdiction. Unless you have a brand developed, they don't care. It's the lowest price per gram.
I'd never thought, I obviously, I always go to cheap labor, right? That's one thing. As they're forming up taxation, what's that going to look like? But it just dawned on me by you saying it, they've got milder climates in the southern of the US. So I'm thinking, hybrid greenhouses, even outdoor. I mean, we've seen what they can do with outdoor in Humboldt.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's not to say that we don't have some really good full spectrum outdoor product here. We do, but we're getting a single grow season. Okanagan Valley, maybe certain areas of the Kootenays you might get two, maybe, but they're just doing it time and time and time again, right? Like they're just rolling crop. They're rolling crop, and it doesn't matter. So obviously they'll have a huge opportunity there. And we already know how well the U.S. operates with export for anything, right? They've opened up the import. Obviously, Trump and his previous administration had closed some things down, but they're masters at export, like masters. And yet we put up as much red tape as we can when it comes to it. Like look at the onerous process of trying to export out of Canada and why so many LPs just fucking avoid it at all costs. So, a kudos to a Stewart Farms or, even Atlantic, they do some exportation as well. Right. So state of the industry, we kind of know now where we're sitting, but like, where is Lucas's crystal ball? What are we looking at for the next year to 2 years?
I like to look at, I think government plays a large role in how things are shaped within our country. I mean, people don't think it's the largest. I think it's the largest. I think what a government dictates, policy rollouts, and economic push buttons basically dictate what happens in this country. And if you look at historical trends, almost every major industry, you have an oligopoly. You have 5 to 10 businesses, maybe 2 to 10 businesses that run everything within the space. Banking, you have 5 banks. Petro, you have 2. You have 2 that run other subsidiaries.
Yeah.
Fame lines, you have 2. Airlines, you have 2. Really, 1.5. And that's because I think, again, be wrong, that the government finds it easier to act and mandate 2 businesses or 5 businesses as opposed to 100 or 200.
Right.
So I think you're going to see something in between. In major, you're going to see major businesses either failing or binding together, i.e., buying each other out, or some sort of merger situation, merger and acquisition situation. And I think by the end of it all, you'll have 5 to 10 LPs standing, large scale LPs, and you'll have maybe 10 to 20 micros left.
Wow.
That's how I see that rolling out long term, 10, 20 years. And again, it might be more. You saw the rise in microbreweries, alcohol space, and there's a massive amount of alcohol producers from a microbrewery standpoint. You have, I'm guessing 10 to 15 on the beer space, 20 to 30 on the spirits. Again, that's a larger segment where you have a lot more players, and then you can look at more red tape segments that have very few players. And we're sitting somewhere in between that, between standard CPG and a highly regulated business. So I think your best, if you take an educated stab at it, you'll be in between those 2 segments.
Yeah.
5 to 10 large scale LPs, and then 10 to 20 micros. I think for a variety of different,
you've got my mind just completely swirling now with trying to think through this. So if I look at it, so current generation, let's call it, I don't know, maybe X's and above generation, there's some roots there. Legacy, they understand OG, genetics and flower, bag appeal, all of this, right? But if I think to the younger generations right now, with products that I'm seeing this, the terp infused, the keef coated, all of these stuff that we never even would have thought of. You know what I mean? Like, this is just, what the fuck are you even doing with that? Just roll a joint, man. Roll a joint. And that's where we see a lot of the success, I think, right now with the craft, because we're going to have to research this, Wes. I need to look into this now, is the vast majority of support for your crafts are probably your Gen X's, maybe a generation down and up to your boomers and continuing, right? The 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and, up till, we'll call it 2000. But then are we going to see a shift? So if this were to happen, because, sometimes the cart is before the horse, right? And we start wondering, well, if it's government influence and this is what's going to potentially shape the industry in the future, where you have this, 10 cannabis LPs, right, that exist, and they're also the ones that are catering to these demographics of the consumer or the purchasing consumer, will we start to see our craft companies go away eventually? Like, and I'm not talking next year. I'm talking like a decade, 2 decades, because we don't think that far out in cannabis. And I'm sure they didn't in, Prohibition ended for alcohol. They weren't thinking, I'm going to go into an LCBO and there's going to be literally 800 SKUs in there, or an SQDC, and there's going to be all these various SKUs and, wines and spirits from across the world. And we're not thinking that far. I mean, some are, Dr. Jackie Shan, for one, right? She thinks way out. But we don't generally think 10, 20 years or in decades in the cannabis industry. Will that affect that? It's just a pondering thought. I don't know. Will we eventually start to see the true craft, living soil cannabis, the ones that are seeking those companies out? Will they start to disappear over time?
I think they'll grow too large to you can call yourself craft all you want, but eventually if you're too big, you're not really a craft product anymore. And then they'll get acquired. And that's what's happening. A lot of the microbrewery spaces, everyone who's done really well, they grow, and then emulsion sits down and goes, hey, I'm going to buy you. You have a great following. You have a good market share. We'd like to capitalize on the segment of the industry. And that's a combination of marketing and client-based stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for the most part, marketing and appeal. There's obviously other reasons why increase their bottom line. Again, really, I think drops down into 2 areas: increasing margin, increasing market share. I think that's what's going to happen. It happens all the time. And unless the government advises, and not just like a microprocessing versus a full-scale processing license, $5,000 a year. No, like, unless you're really incentivizing these businesses to stay afloat, they're either going to crash, fail, because I think there's going to be those massive catastrophic events that are going to play around the industry in Canada, or they're going to get acquired because they're able to uphold those segments. And going back to what you're saying about products that are these crazy high THC terpene infused products, I think for the most part, the terpene infusion into these products is going to taste like ass. Let's be realistic. They don't taste very good. They don't smell very good.
Yeah.
We want them to taste good. I get it. And I think the consumer at this point, because it's so infantile, and not to see visual or infantile, but in terms of the age of the consumer of legal cannabis in Canada, we're going on 6 years now, they're seeking a high THC product. And so if you can't sell a high THC, like, how many times do you go to the store and get really low carb chips? They taste devil. You don't want that, right? So
my wife manages a health food store that comes home all the time, man.
I'm sure though there's
I'm not the person to ask for that.
She finds there are, and I go to the health food store too. I pick out certain products with my girlfriend that are healthy for you, but they can also taste good. And
some of them can, but the vast majority of them taste like ass. It's like I might as well eat the package. Yeah. Well, these are good. Exactly. I'll save these for later.
But it's the same thing. It's the same mentality, which is, okay, these consumers want a product that gets them high, really high, and it has to taste good. Otherwise, they're not going to buy it. And they drill down into those segments, and whatever sells, they keep on the shelf and they keep producing, especially if there's a high enough market.
That goes back to hippy dippy days. Like, let's not forget, everyone's like, oh, no, because, whoa, I got really ripped. That's really good. Or it tastes really good. And right. So, we put a lot on, quit, enough with the high potency, enough with the high potency. I get where it's not just the flower, and I get lab shopping. I get all of that. But at the same time, how high you can get off the product has always been the driver of successful weed sellers. And I'm just using that as a general term because you go back to the days of Cali or BC, right? The Emerald Triangles, it was producing high potency, great tasting weed. And if you had that, that's what sold the most. It was your ditch weed that you'd be sitting on and going, the fuck do I do with this? Anyone got some, bubble hash bags? Let's make some hash out of it, I guess. So I see why it exists, but for me, it's different. I'm a little bit more of a connoisseur, I guess. I don't consume a ton like I used to. So if I'm going to spend the money or I'm going to look for the product, it's got to be taste number one, right? And then the effects from there. So I get it, but I find that, the generations that are seeking that, one, high potency, best bang for the buck, we're under economic pressure as well. But some of them just want to get ripped, right? Like you hand one of those to a younger self of myself, I probably wouldn't even return to cannabis. I'd be like, there's no way. I greened out day one. So not coming back. Anyways, leave us with some parting thoughts. But I have a question. We fell off of doing this. We were asking guests to ask a question of our next incoming guest, and we kind of fell off. And I'm not saying I'm going to pick up on this fully, Wes, but I do have a question for Lucas because I remember one that I don't think we got answered. So I'll ask that in a second. But
I have that question. But
you do have? Is it the Mount Rushmore?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll ask him that in a minute. But I'm curious, out of anything you could have said about the state of the industry on that panel, right? Because I was very tuned in. I'm like, oh, my boy's on there and Michael's on there. I need to hear what's going on. And also, thanks for showing up, Omar. But no, right. But what? Because it was moderated by Jay, and Jay's awesome. But what would you have liked to have said where the question just wasn't asked when it comes to state of the industry? Or maybe Jay did so well that he just asked all the right questions.
I think it's interesting to project who are the top. Like we discussed some of these 5 to 10 players that'll be left standing, and if you're in that boat, I think it'd be interesting to project forward who that would be. Who are the guys that you think will be left standing? Who are they?
Share. Who are the guys?
We look at. I see Rob McPherson all over LinkedIn shitting on businesses, and
he's not the guys, far off sometimes, though. I mean, like I don't want to. He's made some missteps over time, but he's not far. Guys, like you get all up in I think the reason you get so mad is because he's right.
I'm not upset. I'm not upset at it, and I'm happy that there's someone out there who's critiquing these businesses. But I'd love to see in the same breath him saying these are the businesses that are going to succeed.
Yes, which that's a good point. That's a great fucking point.
Yeah,
that's a great point. We need to ask him. We'll ask him.
Please ask him.
But I'm curious now who yours are.
I think we discussed some of them. I think the guys that are vertically integrated, your Atlantic Cultivation, and this is from the public segment. You got, I think you had a net revenue positive quarter for Oxley, so that's positive. You see Canopy trying to get out of their debt position. It depends on who fails. Like it depends on who's going to fail out of those big guys.
Okay.
I think you see a group like MTL doing reasonably well, especially with that medical platform. Decibel is in a position to succeed. Their debt segment's a little bit too high. They'll really have to think about it to give you a really
there's some echoes there though that and I think we're on the same track with it. And I do look at. I get it. In this case, if we were talking typical industry, I would say leadership. Understand the leadership, understand the debt, understand how over or undercapitalized the companies are, and then we can kind of we can triangulate, right? We've got a little bit of a but for me right now, it is very much tied to leadership, very much tied, because they need to understand whether or not to have those very tough conversations with the rest. So the board plus the other, the executive teams, in order to direct the company in the right direction, right? Where to tack and pivot. Okay, we need to do this, but also to understand no matter how big we're getting, this one thing that I loved about Decibel with Adam and team is they know when to pivot and they're not afraid to pivot. You have those conversations when you get into, I could imagine the boardroom conversations at Canopy, and I'm sure there was some good leadership in there. I know some of them, right? There was, that were probably making recommendations. We shouldn't be doing this, or we need to pivot and go this direction. And the ship is just too fucking big. There's just no way, right? But then, you talk about an MTL. I think there'd be tons of success, especially with Michael there, right? He just has a genuine spirit of wanting to help this industry, period. And when I see that, I'm like, yeah, okay, there'll be success. Canara, again, you get into the public side, definitely a front runner for me. I think that they're doing very well. They also got themselves into a good position, right? I think Nico said it straight up. I don't know if that was a, kick in the teeth to some of the operators or not when he was on his panel, but, acquiring that facility for what he did and what was built out, yeah, that's some smart business too. That's a good buy. Anyways, let me ask you this.
Yeah, just one thing.
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
completely agree with you on the operational team at Decibel. I think some of the vertical integration between some of those businesses, I think Canopy, at least Canada, has gone surprisingly lean.
Yeah, big time.
Surprising. And they're doing a great job at it. So anyways, go ahead. Yeah, ask your question.
That's true. And some of the flower coming out of there is really fucking good at a really good price point. So that doesn't drive everything. We know that, but it certainly helps. Okay, your question is, who would, Wes, help me with this. You ask it because I can't remember if you would reshape Mount Rushmore or just add someone.
If there was a second Mount Rushmore, basically, and this Mount Rushmore was dedicated to people from the cannabis industry. So there's 4 people on Mount Rushmore. Who would your 4 people be on your cannabis Mount Rushmore? And I apologize, I can't remember who asked the question because it was quite a few episodes ago. It might have been Kirk. It might have been Kirk Toussaint.
Kirk or Shane. Shane asked who would you smoke with. I think it was Kirk. Yeah, Kirk Toussaint asked that.
So cannabis Mount Rushmore.
4 choices.
4 individuals.
Who's your cannabis individuals that should be forever in stone on the Canadian cannabis Rushmore?
It's a tough question. I think also another tough question. You can go Bruce Lynn, Terry Booth, French Cannoli is another interesting one. And I'm trying to remember who was incarcerated for selling seeds back in the day. I think in the U.S. he was extradited to the U.S. actually for Canada. And I think his nephew is in Halifax or something like that.
I'm trying to remember who that is. I can't remember.
You know what I'm talking about? It was
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Kip would know. Kip Rowe would know.
But that's an easy go. I don't know if you want to use those guys. It's a tough question.
There's a couple names you mentioned. I think people will be scaling it and chiseling the faces off. but at the same time, you got to look at accolades and what was done for the industry in the early days. Like we may not be where we are.
I feel like Rick Simpson's got to be on there. I don't know. I feel like Rick Simpson might be one of those guys.
Yeah. Are we? Yeah. I think. I mean, I look at the legal space more so than the illegal space. I think like Bruce and Terry, as much as you might hate them for what they've done or dislike their ethics and their values associated with the businesses there. Listen, they both raised a shitload of money. I think the reason we have an industry today is like us does that.
Yeah. What about Brendan Kennedy? Would he get up there with him or Privateer, Tilray?
I'm not as. I just like the story. You could throw Brendan in there, but I like the stories. I like the stories from Bruce. I like Bruce's story the most. That's probably one of the fact that he got Constellation to throw in $4 billion into an industry that was just starting up is pretty remarkable. And again, you might get everything else, the operational excellence, you might drive or the ethics that he might have is a whole different can of worms. But we would not have an industry today if it wasn't for those two guys. I think that's easy to say.
Yeah. I'd go smaller scale even, if I were picking another name, and it's your question, it's not for me to pick one, but even John Fowler, right? Like early days,
John Fowler in there.
John Fowler, man, he's so fucking awesome.
Yeah.
He's just
great.
Awesome,
He's
right?
good.
Exited, but fuck you all. Look what I'm doing. Here's Muskoka growing, motherfuckers.
He's done really well.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I don't know if we'd want to throw on people that are, like, for me, and Mount Rushmore are guys that are outside, they're no longer participating. John Fowler is probably a fair one to go. I don't know how far back you'd want to go. It's so young. It's hard to say. I'd like to look back in like 20 or 30 years and go, this guy, because there's probably guys right now that are in the space.
Well, like when we have you back on in 30 years, we're not going to wait that long. But so, Lucas, who was it you said? Maybe there is one.
I'd even look at like Jeff Swainson at Simply Solvent.
Oh yeah,
and that guy's he's an extraordinary dude. If there's no one able to raise capital right now in the space, and they're doing it hand over fist. Super impressive.
That says a lot. That says a lot. If you're raising capital in this space right now, and it's not just fractional to be able to pay the POs, which obviously we love seeing what Weekend is doing. But man, that's tough. What a tough gig. Could you imagine getting hired for that role? So this is the role. Oh, by the way, it's in cannabis, and we need you to raise capital. How do you feel about that?
I would not take that position.
No fucking way. Stress. Anyways, Lucas, man, awesome catching up again. Loved our time together. We finally got to meet in person at CanExec. Thanks for joining Legacies. You're a champ. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. And thanks again, Wes, for helping with everything here.
Anytime, man. Thanks.
Much success, brother.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're now joined by Nicole Ryan, registered nurse for the ACNA, American Cannabis Nurses Association. Did I get that right, Nicole?
You sure did. Very good.
I always worry about acronyms. I'm like, I swear I'm going to screw it up, but I got it right. First, we're going to understand what the ACNA does and why you exist, what your role specifically is within the ACNA, but also we're going to dive into what we're doing this 3-part series on clean versus dirty weed. And some think it's not a problem, but it's a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So anyways, tell us a little bit more about the organization.
Well, the American Cannabis Nurses Association was kind of created in 2010 with Marilyn Mathry as the founding member, and it was this amazing effort by a few pioneering nurses. And in 2016, we became a 501(c)(3). We are a national professional nursing organization, and our mission is to advance excellence in cannabis nursing practice through advocacy, collaboration, education, research, and policy development. And this mission statement is read before every meeting that we have, just to remind us what we're collectively here for, what our collective why is. Wow,
that's incredible. I know that we have certain organizations in Canada that do similar, but that mission statement is all encompassing.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's a tall task as well. What is the primary? I mean, we can talk about patient advocacy and the medical side and medical uses of cannabis, but, the underlying, I guess, true mission of what you're trying to achieve, is it safe use, safe cannabis product? What is that? If you could distill it right down.
I think it comes down to education. Every nurse has a scope and standards. As an RN, as a registered nurse, we all abide by different standards. And within that standard, we expanded into cannabis nursing when it became a nursing specialty. And I think education sort of encompasses all of that, because without education, people don't know about safe products. They don't know, how to use these products efficiently, safely. We're educating healthcare professionals, policymakers, not just the healthcare consumer. And because we are a national organization, or actually international, we do have some Canadian nurses that are in our organization, and I think a couple other countries as well. We're the most trusted profession for 20 plus years, and the knowledge that we have, the baseline knowledge as a nurse, definitely interweaves into cannabis care. It's just another tool in the toolbox that we're exploring as a medicine. And, whether we agree with cannabis as medicine or not, our patients, our healthcare consumers are consuming cannabis. So we have to know how it interacts in the body. We have to know about the endocannabinoid system and the NCSBN guidelines that were established in 2018. It was almost a call to action to all nurses. Like, we have to know this stuff. We have to know how cannabis works in the body. And so education is definitely top on our priority list.
And I see this from an angle where, so first let me ask the question, is there formal education for nurses, nurse practitioners, or even anyone in the medical field to take when it comes to cannabis? And is it only prominent, those education or those educational materials or courses, is it more prominent in the US? Or are you seeing it expanding globally?
I feel like, there's no certification that says, you're board certified in cannabis nursing just yet. Our organization, once we established our scope and standards, and those were published this year, that's sort of the driving force toward that board certification that all cannabis nurses kind of aspire to have. There are a lot of programs out there that, will offer you continuing education credits. They'll call themselves certification, like you can be certified in certain programs. Personally, I attended Pacific College of Health Sciences, and I did their medical cannabis program there, got a certificate of completion, and it's sort of, it's nice to have the college credits in cannabis. And I know the University of Maryland has their medical science. You can get your master's in cannabinoid therapeutics, which is fantastic. Oh, wow. So other countries are definitely involved in the education process. I know some nurses that are out of Israel that are contributing to the conversation. And, Canada, I think as well, there's some programs out there. There's a lot of information. It's just a matter of, where you're finding it.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel we're still early? Because cannabis as a whole, weed, right? I even try not to say weed anymore because there's certain individuals that are kind of curious and they're like, oh, weed, I have never touched weed. But at the same time, I am curious, we're different in Canada, obviously, not that it's colder, but, the fact that we're federally legal and, with the opportunity coming in the US where it will become potentially, depending, federally legal, has it been an issue for certain colleges, universities, or just post-secondary in general because it's one thing to form a course, right? It's one thing to help understand what the endocannabinoid system does, how we support it. But it's another to have clinical study, clinical trial to see. And then we get into the vast array of different cannabis products and types of consumption and the modality. There's so much. We just real early in this and, we still have a million miles to travel, or what are the challenges around that?
So I think we are just scratching the surface. I mean, the endocannabinoid system, the education part of it is trickling into mainstream education. I know there are pharmacy schools across the country are integrating that program, some medical programs also. Personally, in my nursing education, I graduated nursing school in North Carolina in 2019. Marijuana is still considered an illicit street drug in my textbooks. I sometimes question who is funding these textbooks and why is it not being changed. It was very frustrating as a student nurse to already have grown hemp, extracted oils, formulated products, used it to my own benefit. And people are scared of the high, like you said, the weed. Oh my gosh, you're high. And I wasn't getting high. I was taking a full spectrum hemp oil that was helping with my test anxiety and allowed me to focus a little bit better and do my job a little bit better, study better. And then, undercover, here I was, graduated, got my RN in March 2020 and started to work on cardiovascular intensive care. And I had to stop taking my hemp oil. So the stigma is a huge issue, even around nurses who are supposed to treat and educate without judgment. It's going to be really difficult. I'm not sure federal legalization will even change that because there are still people that, and I hate to compare alcohol to cannabis, but there are still people that don't agree with alcohol consumption, and it's federally legal. Definitely changing the vernacular. I don't use the term marijuana. I think it's really funny that we have medical marijuana programs. I understand why we use it, but it is cannabis. And, you know, truly even hemp, it is medicinal hemp. It is cannabis. It is the plant just bred to have a lower concentration of THC versus CBD.
Yeah. I think through, so as you're speaking, I'm thinking of all the challenges of what we've seen, and you're right. So one is, you know, the alcohol versus cannabis dilemma. We know that there's, but coming to that, I think early days, because I was a legacy operator, have no shame in saying so. And then following the regulations as they formed in Canada from, you know, early days MMAR all the way through a Cannabis Act that we have, which we're coming up on tomorrow, actually, the 6th year anniversary of that. And everyone was, oh, the regulations are so, I said, yes, the regulations suck. They're overbearing. They're very stringent. However, there still is a very large proportion of our population that is 100% dead set against cannabis, period, regardless of how it is. And they're seeing it, maybe not so much in their face, but they're seeing the promotion of it. And I don't say promotion of, you know, it's everywhere, because we can't put it on billboards. We can't even put, you know, I don't know if you've seen Canadian packaging, but here's what it looks like. I don't know if that helps, that there's like nothing, right? And I have to black it out, because this is how ridiculous it gets, is there's a black marker spot here where I had to block out the THC logo. If we put this THC logo on this video and it goes on YouTube, they will take it down. Ludicrous. So to your point is, you know, you still have that, even at the federal level, if federal legalization were to happen in the US, does that help the ACNA and your mission, or hinder it potentially, or it doesn't change anything?
I think it would help us, definitely. There would be some minds change. There would be some nurses that would be a little bit more accepting of being educated in this area. I think that as far as the clinical trials go, that would be fantastic. But as we know, the endocannabinoid system is individualized. We know from varieties of cannabis cultivars that there can be differences in how it interacts with your body. You know, I don't even use the term sativa indica anymore. I talk about terpene profiles, and, you know, to not to make cannabis super nerdy and everything, but that
I like nerding out on it. Keep going.
I know. So that determines how, you know, somebody may feel. But I mean, in my particular area of expertise, when I talk to cannabis consumers, they'll say things like, give me an indica. And I say, well, what do you want to accomplish? And they'll say they want to relax. And sometimes the variety they get is deemed an indica, and they'll go home and clean their entire house and be super energized. So to do these clinical trials, it's going to be really interesting to see how well we're going to be able to duplicate the results. So it's going to be fun. It's definitely going to be exciting to have. And clinical trials for nurses in the research area, oh my gosh, they're salivating. They can't wait to get into these. The research is going to be fantastic.
And so long, though, like Wes and I were at, it's called the Can Exec Summit, and there was an individual on one of the panels. Her name is Dr. Jacqueline Shan, not Jackie Chan, Jacqueline Shan. She is actually the founder and creator of Cold Effects. I don't know if you have that in the US, but it's a very popular, you know, I'm starting to feel I'm going to get a cold, and you pop these, and 20 years in the making. I mean, she's been successful with it, but she's in the cannabis space, and she was talking about clinical trials, and when we see collaboration between the universities, and obviously it's a different story for us right now in Canada, because universities are a little bit more open to it, right? They'll develop the programs around it. But when you talk clinical trials, I mean, that can be a challenge in of itself. But at the same time, I said to Wes, I leaned over and, you know, I'm like, oh my God, I'm just thinking all the various cannabinoids, all the different terpenes and terpenoid and flavonoids, and the effect on the body, and how they, you know, the entourage effect, but semi-entourage effect based on, and I'm just looking at it going, how the hell will this ever be possible to study? Like, you almost have to pick a lane, stay within just this for right now, and then, okay, I've got clinical evidence. I don't know anything about this, right? That's why you're here. But do you pick something where you can continuously replicate? So say I'm dealing with a distillate, it's the same, you know, the terpene profiles were not stripped, or maybe they had to be. And now I'm studying just this particular side of the cannabis plant.
The word she used for it was fingerprint, right? It was the fingerprint of that plant, was that terp profile, all that stuff matched. Until you have that kind of fingerprint to replicate, you're never going to be able to do that, right?
Yeah. But do you see that as one of the challenges when it comes to clinical studies and trials, and I think they're similar in the US as they are in Canada and would be worldwide when it comes to that. Obviously, the evidence and the outcome can vary. But what are the challenges around the clinical studies and trials?
So when you think about, this fingerprint, I really like that term, the fingerprint of the plant. And as I call myself an amateur grower, I'm learning from a legacy grower myself. And, when you grow the plant indoor versus greenhouse versus outdoor, you get a different result. And depending on the crop, and I mean, even a plant within the same variety could be a little bit more robust than not. And so it's going to be really tricky to do what we're asking to do. And, a lot of our studies in the United States, they're coming from a source of cannabis that probably isn't up to your standards as a grower. And I feel that it may be misleading on what the medicines can do. But, as a nurse, we navigate and because we treat it as an individualized treatment or modality, I think we just have to listen to our patients and give them the autonomy, that empowerment to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm doing. And do we necessarily have to duplicate it? I mean, we know that consumption of cannabis could potentially help with nausea with patients that are receiving chemo. We also know that there's a pharmaceutical, Marinol, that is supposed to do the same thing. Now, this is a pharmaceutical synthetic medication that's prescribed for nausea induced from chemotherapy. That medication causes nausea in some patients. So,
Jeez.
I mean, even though we're using it to treat nausea, it can still cause nausea. There's side effects that are going to be really hard to avoid. But, we'll just navigate it. I think dosing is really important, educating patients on proper dose. There are a lot of clients that come in and will say, I don't want to be high. So they think automatically I can't have THC. Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, a low dose might not have that side effect. So it's going to be interesting to see. And you're right. I think it's going to have to be little pockets and little groups that are interested in certain things. There's over 400 plus chemical constituents in this plant. Some we know, some we don't. We don't know how they interact yet. And, I think the growers are going to have to play a role in this too. We're going to have to do something, to collaborate with them as well to be able to produce this. And I think Dr. Ethan Russo sort of helped along this path and what he was doing in the cannabis space as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, because I mean, so one, I like that you pointed out the sativa versus indica versus hybrid, right? Which for us has been an issue forever. But so as a professional, do you focus more on the cannabinoid or the terpene profiles to help with treating a certain condition? I mean, we have to be careful. So even in Canada, you can't make any of these claims like at all. You can't say that it helps with these symptoms. You like because Wes and I come from tech, and our tech software was supporting the vast majority of the LPs in the early days, and we had built out on the medical platform the ability to register all the different terpenes that came in on your COAs or certificate of analysis, and then there was symptoms. Now, the only group in all of Canada that wanted to understand the symptomatic exposure, what was actually going on, was Veterans Affairs Canada. They're the only ones that wanted that recorded. Anything else, any other claim outside of that, completely offside. We're not allowed to talk about that. And which to me is completely ass backwards, because we started as medical and treating medical conditions, but it was almost like the Supreme Court and the rulings on this when it came to the federal level were like, yeah, we're just going to appease them. Oh, they want medical cannabis? Okay, we'll give it to them. But God forbid you talk about the use cases and what you're treating with it and what the symptoms are. So like coming back to my question, that was very long-winded, sorry, do you focus more on, so I come in with, that's funny because I just watched The Upside last night. I don't know if you've seen that with Brian Cranston, quadriplegic, tons of medication. Kevin Hart is his caregiver. And he's like, so you still have issues in your legs, still have pain? He's like, yeah, it's like horrible. And he's like, I got you. He takes him down to Central Park and he goes and finds a quarter or something and comes back with this doob. And, he's like, it's not going to work. I've tried it before. And sure enough, he's like, I'm good. Now, obviously that's dramatic, cinematic, right? And it's not the same, but are you focusing more on the cannabinoids? Because this has always been something I've questioned is, is it a CBN? Is it a CBC? Is it THC? Is it CBD? I don't know which one. Or is it the terps that are coming into play and helping to create that entourage effect? I don't know.
Yeah, there's kind of an ongoing discussion with my alchemist friend. He, he's a very smart guy, and we have this debate constantly. And here's what I know. I know THC can cause euphoria. It can cause elevation. It can also cause dizziness and all these things. But the terpenes, when added to the THC, can also have a calming effect, can change the way you feel, because we all know different varieties make us feel differently. And it can't just be the THC. Because THC is the one common factor, and it's a matter of, for my understanding, is terpenes are what determine how you're going to feel. So I'm a terpene-aholic, I guess you would say. I really think that if you're not purchasing cannabis without a terpene profile, I mean, you're just playing the crapshoot. I mean, and some of us are okay with that. I mean, before any legalization was around, we were consuming cannabis, whatever we had. And it's just,
what do you have? I got this bag.
Yeah.
I've got this bag. Like, do you want this bag or this bag?
And if you smelled it, and if it smelled cheesy or gassy, you were like, oh, okay, this one's for me. And like some people were like, no, I need that spicy floral. So, I mean, it was kind of fun. It was like a grab bag, so like a Cracker Jack box. You didn't know what you were going to get. Now we're fine tuning that. And I think it is terpene determined, to answer your question. I was long winded too, I guess, but terpenes are definitely.
I love it. I love the explanation.
And maybe even those flavonoids too. I mean, we don't know. Those could be contributing to it as well. But the entourage effect, it goes back to that.
And borrowing from, as much as I'm not a huge supporter of the alcohol industry, gin, for instance, very heavy in terpenes and terpenoids, and one gin may be different than another, and the effects could be potentially different. And talk to anyone that's overdrank anything. They say, oh, if I touch too much gin, I'm never going back. And I have to think, well, it's probably because of the terps in it. But anyways, let's move on a little bit to understanding, the differences in the qualities potentially of the cannabis that's available. And it seems like it's becoming a more apparent issue is dirty cannabis. And we'll just label it as dirty cannabis right now, because that could be a number of different things that are attributing to that. So whether it's, heavy metals or pesticides presence in the cannabis, botrytis potentially. What's the other one? Aspergillus? Is that how you say it? Yeah. What are you seeing from your side, the issues that are being presented? Because I don't think, black market legacy days, we didn't talk about this. Someone has a little cough, you probably smoke too much, or you smoke too much weed, whatever it is. But, in Canada, I'll give you a frame of reference, or at least a reference point with it, is the regulators like to come off as regulated cannabis is tested, it's clean. So, and then the black market side is saying, hold on, we know for a fact, and we've seen it in the legal market, you still get a bag of moldy weed. I've seen it in the black market. So what I'm saying is I see it on both sides, but at the same time, we've created a framework to protect the consumer. But at the same time, there's still product that's making it there. So let's first start with, what are the issues? And we don't have to break down every one, but when you come to, molds or various types of molds that are in a product versus, say a heavy metal or a pesticide, what is the effect? What is the outcome to the consumer and the danger?
So there's quite a few. For the healthy consumer, you may be described as like having a mild cough, and you might attribute it to a dirty bowl or dirty bong, or your durable medical equipment needs to be cleaned, or you have consumed too much that particular day. But to the immunocompromised client, you can see all sorts of things. Aspergillosis could be a factor. I'm not sure how common that is in a lot of cannabis. I mean, I'm in the North Carolina market, and we have legalized hemp, and we have this wonderful, robust hemp industry based on a definition. We have THCA hemp flower that is being sold, and there's no real regulation or safety precautions. So as a producer, it is my responsibility to make sure that you're growing in the right ways. You're flushing your hemp or your cannabis appropriately, and there's nobody checking up on us either. So also the curing process, and that's where you see a lot of those molds. And also as a grower, you wonder, was this in a pot? Was this a potted plant? Was this grown in the ground? In North Carolina, we have a robust clay that contains quite a bit of cadmium, and in California, the cadmium amount that is allowed in your cannabis is much lower than it is allowed in North Carolina, considered to be within, the okay amounts. So what I see a lot of is, because I'm in a non-medical, non-rec state, people will go to local other states and bring their cannabis to me and say, can you tell me, like, is this good? I'm like, well, where's the certificate of analysis? And they still don't know what that is, which is a problem. The consumer has no idea. They're buying stuff online. They're bringing it into my shop and they're asking me, oh, can you tell me if this is any good? I'm like, well, why didn't you do that for yourself before you purchased it? And they're just kind of going,
bought it.
Yeah.
Tail light warranty.
And they'll say, well, I didn't go to the gas station to get it. I got it off of Amazon. I'm like, well, that's lovely. But at the same time, you want to see these tests. And a lot of times you'll see the cannabinoid and the terpene profile. Every now and then you'll see other tests for it as well, like heavy metals. Hardly ever do I see residual solvents in a lot of the preparations extracted from cannabis, which is a huge problem. So I mostly see moldy, powdery mildew on whole flower, and people are like, it's so dank, it's got all the crystals on it. And I'm like, oh man, it's definitely frosty, but not in the good way.
Not in a good way. Yeah.
Not in a good way. And some of the preparations that I'm seeing are marketed to medical patients on Amazon or online, and they're buying it, and they're bringing the bottles to me, and it's a very nutritious hemp oil. It will say hemp oil, and there's absolutely no CBD in it, and people think that they're purchasing a full spectrum, and it's just hemp oil.
We have that issue. We have that issue in Canada. It's one that we're taking on ourselves, even with Legacies, which is, we're calling it free CBD, right? Not free. It's not free, but the fact that, our CBD in Canada is regulated much the same as it is THC. It's right alongside it. And it's only available in those dispensaries, the same dispensaries. And we know that the vast majority that are seeking CBD products are under a wellness or a health type lens or from that angle. So why not have it in healthcare stores, right? Or health product stores? The issue with that right now is, because there's very little regulation in that CBD side, there's so many boastful claims of these products, and they are hemp seed derived nothing. And that's what I call them. Nothing. They are nothing but another oil. You might as well cook with it, because it's not giving you anything. And so obviously access to COAs or certificate of analysis is available. And it sounds like it's similar in Canada. Some very, I'll say, above board operators are happy to share their COAs. They put them online. Health Canada does not, even though they can talk about top terps on our bags. You cannot put, your certificate, as far as I know or understand anyways, you can't put a COA or any description of that COA on your packaging. What would go one step further, which is a challenge that we're actually trying to tackle, is how about just a QR code that you can scan and it'll take you to nope, that's not allowed. You can't have any of that stuff on our packaging, which is, outside the marketing side of things, from the health benefit of a consumer being able to scan even just natural barcode, UBC barcodes, or a QR code that would direct me to, even if that's it, that's all I would ask for, just direct me to the COA. But at the same time, Nicole, we see this as another major issue in Canada, and I'm sure it has to be going on in the US, which is, I guess I need to break it down a little bit so you can understand it and then be able to speak to it from this side. So province to province, they put out distribution calls or product calls. And depending on what a certain province is hot on for that month or that quarter, they may want high potency flower. They may want a certain amount of vapes, whatever it might be. And certain producers will be able to fulfill those requirements through POs, but they still have to hit those markers. So let's say, Ontario Cannabis Store, they're looking for a 30% flower. They need it in these formats, and I'm a producer. I go, yeah, I can get that. No problem. I can fulfill that order. I then grow my crop, or I'm close to harvesting it. I finally get it done. It's cured, potentially cured. It's dried. I get a lab result that is 21%. And then I go, well, shit, I had distribution opportunity with Ontario, but I don't know where I'm going to shop it now. Oh, I know. I'll lab shop it. So, and this exists in our market right now where I will then go to a different lab, or in some cases, I'll go back to the same lab and go, are you sure it was 21%? You sure it wasn't 30%? And then all of a sudden there's a new COA. Now, we know it's happening, but Wes and I know it had happened previously for sure, because again, we provided compliance technology to these operators, and all of a sudden COA results were changing, and we would have to make data records of that. Are you seeing that? I mean, it would have to be a similar issue. And if they are fudging numbers on potency, could they also be just scratching the line and putting, oh no, it's within the tolerance for, you talked about cadmium and some of these other heavy metals. Nah, it's good. It's within tolerance. What is the issue? One, from a health standpoint, but two, is it happening in the US as well, or state to state?
So yeah, I deal with this very often in my expert area. We had one lab company that we were using very early on, and they would ask what numbers we were shooting for, and I was like, well, this is just a full spectrum oil. You tell me what's in it, and they were like, okay, well, what are you thinking? And I'm like, no, that's not how this works. And then, another time within the same company, this is before we switched labs, where we sent in a broad spectrum oil, which we knew from our lab had no THC whatsoever, completely not possible. And we sent it to the third party lab, and they came back with the result, and there was THC in it. And I said, this is interesting, but can you run it again? And they were like, sure, but it's not going to change. And then they called us back, sent us the COA, and there was THC in it again. And we had this big conversation with my lab, with the grower, with all these different parts and pieces. And, we came to the conclusion that, well, maybe your machine needs to be cleaned, and we need to be the first run of the day. Well, they said, we can't do that every time you want your particular product run. And I said, well, if you're running my broad spectrum right after a full spectrum, there could be residue in your machine that is contaminating my sample. And they were not okay with, us. We even said, we'll pay for the cleaning of it, but they weren't really into it. And so we switched labs, and that, wasn't an issue after that. And since we're never asked, what do we expect to find in here? We have a goal, a personal goal in our lab, but we're not going to give that information out. We'll just call it what it is, a full spectrum. But then you see other companies too, where, because I get to see, Nurse Nicole, can you tell me if this is any good? And I'll scan the QR code and it's broken. The QR code takes you nowhere. Or the QR code will work and take you to this result that you can clearly see was manipulated in a lot of different ways. And or some companies require you to purchase their product before you can get a certificate of analysis, which I think is kind of a bummer for the consumer. But I understand why they're doing that. They don't want their COA to be ripped off and used for, another company. And in the unregulated market, I mean, labs have a 20% variance. So, your lab could have said your cannabis was 21%, but maybe it was a little bit higher. Maybe it was a false test. It's going to be really difficult. And I think the most important thing is these heavy metals, molds, pesticides, mycotoxins. There is no room for error in those areas. There has to be something standardized where these tests are being, done appropriately so that we can make sure that the product is actually safe. And then we have to worry about, cannabinoids and terpenes. And if there's a variance by a percentage in a terpene, that's not going to be a huge issue. Cannabinoids, potentially, if there's a little more THC, but, there's usually kind of a room for error in that. You just ride the wave if it's a little bit stronger than you had hoped for. But really the safety part of it, like there should be no pesticides in your cannabis, like across the board. Heavy metals, residual solvents are huge. Different extraction methods, CO2 versus ethanol versus butane, they all have their benefits. But then is your producer purging those elements and making your products safe? I'm not at the bedside, so I don't get to see the clients come in firsthand when they overconsume. It's probably an overconsumption issue. But a lot of my nurse friends in the ED will say, oh, they were psychotic. They had a psychotic break. They ate a gummy and, they went into this psychosis. And I said, well, where's the product? What did the label say? Where's the CON? And they're like, what are you talking about? It's THC. It's causing them to have this episode. And I kind of wonder a lot of these cases that are coming through, if it's residual solvents that are causing these neurological problems, these mental health issues, and other things.
Wow. I never thought of that. That's profound. Because I've heard of psychosis. Obviously, that's one of the front runners of, the issues, air quote, dangers of cannabis.
Right.
And I've actually had 2 friends that have experienced psychosis from the use of cannabis. Consumption. I hate saying use of.
No,
I continue to say that, but consumption. Use, it just sounds dirty. It's like, I'm a heroin addict in the
like
alley or something. Yeah. But oh my God, I never thought that. So let me ask you this then. So moving potency, terpene profiles, everything aside, number one, kudos on, certain states allowing QR codes on packaging. What?
Yeah.
Your freaking thought.
I know.
But so if we move the potencies aside and we start looking at, residual pesticides, heavy metals, etc., is that still present in your gummies, in your edibles, in your concentrates? And would it depend on, because I was a grower, but I wasn't an extractor, and I've never got into the science enough to understand what is the tolerance levels, what can still be there, especially when there's, the old school ways where butane and that sort of thing, right? But is there still presence of those pesticides if they were used, or the heavy metals that would have transference to those end products if they were edibles or vapes or anything like that?
If the producer is using these chemicals and their alchemist is not skilled in purging, then yeah. And you'll see these products. Usually they're the ones that are sold at gas stations, in markets that aren't really regulated for safety protocols. But I think as a grower, your job is to make sure that there's no heavy metals growing in your root system, make sure that your pesticides are covered. And that's great. A lot of the times we'll test our flower for the whole gamut of heavy metals, molds, pesticides, mycotoxins. And then after we extract the oils, we'll test the distillate for, again, residual solvents and things like that. And then a lot of companies, especially if they're smaller, these tests are very expensive. And I understand why they might not be done so frequently, because bottom line, the cannabis industry, unfortunately, is a little shady, seedy sometimes, and it's all about making the profits. So when you have companies that only care about, their profit, the consumer is the one that, kind of gets the short end of the stick. So I'm not seeing a lot of that in my area. I'm, again, not at the bedside, so I'm kind of missing out on a lot of the education opportunities for nurses and doctors and even the clients that come in. I do have a lot of friends there, so they're kind of advocating for these patients that, maybe you should go talk to a cannabis care nurse, and which is really amazing and awesome because people don't know this. We know it because we're in the industry on this side of it. We know what we can do. We know the manipulation that is abound in the industry, and we're just kind of like, there's a lot of good guys out there, but there's a lot of bad seeds, and the Amazon market is incredible. People are getting stuff shipped all over the place, and you don't know where that distillate's coming from. If it's coming from places like China, for instance, it could be contaminated. They have different rules and regulations that even us in the United States. But pesticides, I hardly ever see anyone testing positive for pesticides. People also use pesticides that are considered organic, which is hilarious to me. Like pyrethrin, for instance, is an organic sort of, or neem oil. Neem oil and pyrethrin
neem oil,
they're considered
guilty
safe.
of using neem oil in the past. 100% guilty myself.
Yes,
thinking, it's totally fine.
Yes. Yeah. And, at the same time, it can cause problems too. So people are like, oh, my cannabis is organic. And I'm like, okay, all right, sure. It can still have residual pyrethrin in there. And if you're allergic to chrysanthemums, you're shit out of luck. You're going to have a
exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Man, so many good points. We could be 5 hours going through this because now I've got another million questions. So if the argument's always this, right? You've got black market operators, love them, hate them, whatever. I understand them. Right? This is where I cut my teeth. They're always again, the legal market, the government weed, this is garbage. And, just because it's this, and then, you've got the regulated market saying, the black market weed is full of pesticides and you don't know how it was growing, or wouldn't you at least want to know? And I get both arguments. I understand both arguments. Like I said, I see good cannabis and bad cannabis on both sides of the spectrum. It doesn't matter. But I know for a fact, so two questions. One's a statement, I guess. I know for a fact, I knew some of the best cultivators in the game, and they would be living soil. They would be as organic as possible. Some of them, organic uses, using neem oils and whatnot. But in the black market, when you're sitting on a crop that's potentially worth $100,000 and spider mites hit you week 3 of flowering,
whoa,
these guys have to go, do I pay my mortgage or do I wipe the crop? Right? And they go, fuck, I've got to pay my mortgage. And they come in with a nuclear bomb. Because at the end of the day, they need the cash flow, and cash was king in the black market. So it wasn't like I'm going to get a line of credit so that I can, make way like they do in the legal side. It was, yeah, I get it. I used as many organic products as possible, but now I've got to drop the bomb on them. I have no choice, right? So I understand that, and that's more of a statement than it is on the other side of it now. So with these products where people are consuming these, the heavy metals and the myotoxins, can you test for that in the human body? Like, does it show up in blood work? Does it show up in saliva? Does it show up anywhere in testing?
So I'm sure you can test for different levels in the blood. Is it being done? Probably not. I don't think doctors or insurance companies are willing to pay for these blood tests, so to speak. I mean, you go to the doctor to take your yearly blood work panel and make sure that everything was in the norms. Unless you're ill, they're not going to do panels. And I sure doubt that they'll take, let's check this blood for heavy metals to make sure that there's no cadmium in your bloodstream, unless they're presenting and is the patient being authentic with their healthcare provider? Are they willing to say, I smoke cannabis? Could this be the issue? And because they're afraid that they'll be judged, or the doctor will say, oh yes, it's because of the cannabis, don't do that anymore. And then they're put in this weird position. But I think the edibles that are contaminated, it's most likely, in my opinion, this may be inaccurate, but it's definitely my opinion. I stick with it. I think it's the residual solvents that are causing a lot of issues with folks, but they're not going to test for, butane. I don't know how you would do that. That might be a doctory question, but the symptoms could, lead them to the point of maybe they are poisoned with a heavy metal or some type of solvent. And
what would the symptoms be if you had heavy metal poisoning? And I don't even know the tolerance on how much I'm consuming it like it's Halloween and I'm eating, gummy after gummy, or is it, mild use day? Because I do know this for a fact. There are individuals that when it comes to edibles, they will use that as their modality, and they morning, noon, night, morning, and day after day after day. And I do know because of the cost, that's right. And so in the Canadian market, this is where it presents a specific challenge, right? So in the Canadian cannabis market, if I look at a package, so you're not allowed any more than 10 milligrams per package. Okay. So in this case, I've got 2 gummies, right? But I know people that eat 25, 50, 100 milligram gummies, and you are not getting those in Canada, not on the regulated side. And a package like this may cost 5 to 7 Canadian dollars, which is like 40 cents US. No, I'm just kidding. So what they do is they then turn to the black market or the illicit market to purchase that, and for good reason, right? But these are the individuals that they use it. They've got their morning, noon, and night, and they've been doing it for literally, I know of individuals that have been doing it for 2-3 years. And we can't say for sure because there is zero COA happening on the majority of them. They may test their cannabis, right? But they aren't going to go test the cannabis, test the distillate or the can of butter or the rosin or the whatever's going into it, and they're not going to test the end product. I know that. So what are the symptoms that would come from either the mycotoxins or the heavy metals or those pesticides? What would you see?
So mostly from the standpoint of the immunocompromised patient, they'll probably have more of a significant amount of symptoms very early on. I think your regular consumer, like you were saying, the nibbles here and there throughout the day, they may produce symptoms, but it may take longer, or their body's strong enough to sort of fight it off and flush it out. A lot of the times when you're seeing these issues with the heavy metals, or even, pesticides, you might see organ toxicity. With your liver, your kidneys, you may have elevated kidney values. Same with the liver. Your liver is in charge of metabolism. So when your body is converting that delta-9 THC to 11-hydroxy, the metabolite, we don't know what it's doing in the body sort of after that with your particular medication regimen. It could cause an issue that, shuts your kidneys down, shuts your liver down, depending on the dose or what is the contaminant in there. You can also see endocrine dysfunctions or disruptions, different hormone levels, reproductive issues, diabetes potentially could be affected by that as well, and increased risk for cancer. A lot of these have carcinogenic effects to them, so you'll see that. And again, because their already weakened immune system is present, an even further weakened immune system. So your friends that are generally healthy may start to have those symptoms, and over time you may see different things come about, but it's probably a slower process with those folks. And residual solvents, the same. Immunocompromised individuals, you'll see those respiratory distress can be an issue as well.
Wow. I keep thinking, the slow for those that are not immunocompromised, it would be just a slow, and all of a sudden it's there and you're like, why am I so sore? Why am I sick? Why am I not feeling good? Right. And it's a creep, just creeps up on you. And there has been argument before I've heard it, and although I, dispel it, which is, the immunocompromised shouldn't be smoking cannabis or consuming cannabis anyways. I'm like, why the fuck do you think they're taking it?
Yeah.
There's some reason. There's an underlying issue that they are looking to, curb. Like they're looking for relief of some sort, whatever it might be.
But like when you talk about consumption, most people think, inhalation. And because there's such a stigma around that inhalation, these edibles seem to be more, appropriate for some folks that aren't cool with inhalation. And again, like different patients, different products, you feel the inhalation effects within seconds, and that may be needed with whatever symptom you're trying to dampen. But then you've got the cannabis drinks and the other beverages or the other edibles that people can consume, and the high concentrates that are out there as well. And there's a little bit of harm in that. But like, it's interesting that the patient or the client that is consuming cannabis with inhalation, they are totally okay with the side effects of that potential, that risk factor, because it outweighs, or the benefit outweighs that risk for them.
Right.
End of life care, for instance, is a big one. You're dying with cancer, your days are over. You're coming to terms with all of these things. Like, what do you want? Do you want the morphine that, kind of knocks you out and you lose time with your family? Or do you want the cannabis joint or the volcano hit that allows you to be present and be with your family? So, the judgment factor is a big one with inhalation, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I think, we're friends with a few pro-cannabis doctors, and, they can't endorse smoking cannabis, obviously, for many reasons. But at the same time, you've got the argument where, they could just take a gummy or take a capsule, take a THC capsule. And I'm like, when you're in that kind of pain or dealing with those types of symptoms, you want immediate relief. It's not something where you're just staying on it constantly like you would an OxyContin, which I am dead set against, but any other opioid. You're not just staying on it, taking, it's 6 o'clock, I got to take this. Now it's, 12 o'clock, I got to take another one. It is, I've got pain, I've got this going on, Crohn's especially, I need immediate relief. I'm dealing with it now, which is great because last week we had Michael from Ouija's on, and one, we were like just blown away. Like, this guy's a serial entrepreneur and inventor.
I know, right?
But the fact that the ACNA has endorsed many of, not if not all of, the products that he puts out. And I'm looking at this going, wow, like the dew tube with the filters, like this is great. It doesn't make it perfect, but it certainly improves every single thing about it. So let me ask this then, because next week we're talking to RadSource, and they're in the irradiation game. So if I have contaminated cannabis, because there's this theory where, oh, you don't want to radiate it, it's horrible. You don't want E-beam, it's horrible cannabis. It kills this, it kills that. It's killing all the good stuff too. Dispel any rumors, I guess. Like, just help us understand this, because that thought is, especially from the purist, I want living soil, organic, that was hand trimmed by fairies in the middle of the night and left at my hearth. Like, that's all they want, right? But yet we know the vast majority has been, especially if it's getting shipped from Canada anyways, shipped to Germany. I think it has to be irradiated. I'm not sure. So what's the deal with it, I guess?
So I guess I can maybe speak off the ACNA platform and just kind of speak to that from my own standpoint, because we have no stance on that. I would say I'm not super familiar and expert in any way, shape, or form with that type of technology. But going by what we know as consumers, as growers, and some of us extractors, if it's there, present in the plant, I question whether or not it has disturbed the cannabinoid potency, the medicinal potency of that particular bud. And then you extract it, and you can clean up anything in a lab. You can do a lot of different things. You can remove, pesticides from a crop that you extract the oils from and put it in a bottle. I know you can do that. But is that okay? I mean, just because it's not there in the lab test doesn't mean that it's still an issue. We used to just call food, and now we have to say, oh, it's organic food, just to know that it is safe for consumption. Like, oh, I don't buy organic bananas, but I buy organic berries, because you peel the banana, and like, does that make it okay? I don't really know. And I feel the same about cannabis products. When you have these methods like, what is it? The ozone that you can clean out, a room with, that's not safe to breathe in. I can't imagine it being okay to consume. I mean, fish guts and, different compost teas and all that stuff. And, Edward Scissorhands or little fairies trimming your bud. If that's what you prefer, then you find those people. Like, as a consumer,
Right.
You don't have to just take what you want. Like, but we should, be transparent. And you could say this bud was eradicated with this type of machine. And if folks are okay with that, go for it. We can't rely on government policies, because the FDA allows certain types of chemicals in certain amounts in our foods that aren't allowed in other countries. I just watched something, and not to get off topic, but I just watched, the ingredients on a box of cereal in the United States versus in the UK.
It's
and
horrible.
It's ridiculous.
It's horrible.
So,
And then
yeah,
take
and
it to
even-
Japan. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's not okay. It's not okay.
It's mind-boggling.
But it's on
Yeah.
the label.
No, I agree.
As a consumer, you should be able to
Right.
make that decision. And I'm all about supporting your local farmer. You find your farmer, you find where his products are being extracted, you find the chain of custody, you find out who's getting his distillate, who's making the product with it, if you can. If they're all one and the same, go for it. Those are the guys that
Yeah.
you want to gravitate towards.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it makes you wonder, like, I'm very much, Wes knows this, I'm very much in the conspiracy theory of things, right? So when you talk about, like, and I'm assuming you alluded to big pharma in some cases, and you don't have to answer that, but, I'm looking at things going, there's a reason, Wes, there's a reason. Money talks, money always talks. But it makes me think of, right now in Canada, there's a not-for-profit that's leading the charge on standardization of testing, and that labs should be operating at a standard. But at the same time, if it comes from the government down, I always look at it like there's nefarious activities that always happen, right? And where was something just kind of passed through. Like I can't trust necessarily just because even it may say organic. There's a lot of different claims around organic, even in the foods, and I'm talking just foods, right? It's organic, but they're allowed to spray with this amount. Well, what are those thresholds? I don't know, right? And bringing it back to, if we had more transparency on packaging, especially for Canada, right now you've got, at least you're on the right track, right? I know of, anti-counterfeiting technologies that were available because it was a big issue with counterfeit vapes in California back, I think it was 5-6 years ago. That's one step in the right direction. But I think you've made a great point, which is, if you are that purist, you want to understand what I'm putting in my body, or I want to understand, then do your research on the company, right? Because I think right now, and I'm sure you see this, the US would have a million times more SKUs than we would have in Canada, but we have a lot of SKUs across, 3,500 license holders, 1,500 brands, and each probably having, 5 to 6, 7 different SKUs distributed across Ontario and the other provinces. It's tough to track some of it because you don't know, well, I like this brand, and I've done this in the other CPG space, right? Which is, I love this. And then you find out it's owned by, I don't know, BlackRock or, Vanguard Group or something like that, or Monsanto. And you're like, wow, screw this. I'm not consuming that anymore. So like, where do you see the future of this potentially? And it doesn't matter if it's federally legalized or not in the US, but it sounds like you have the same challenges, right? Which are, you talked about a lab just maybe potentially not cleaning their equipment. I've always wondered that myself, right? Which is, well, okay, that's one thing, but also, when was it calibrated? Or what is your methodology of testing versus, there's mass spectrometers versus, chemo, whatever it is, chemo something, whatever. But then there is no standardization in Health Canada from our standpoint. They're not saying it has to be this way. And I can almost guarantee the FDA is not going to say it has to be this way. So what does the consumer do other than that research? Like, is there any hope? Like, how do we hone in on, I know what the product is I'm consuming, I know it's safe?
Yeah, that's, I don't think we're going to solve that anytime soon. I don't know a way to do it. I know, I wish we could solve all these problems in this short amount of time we have, but I don't have an answer for it. I just know in my heart that if you find the right players, if you find, and a lot of spaces don't allow you to do that. Like when you have regulation in the medical space or even like the rec space, you have to jump through some serious hoops to get into these programs. I know in New York, their program, if you're a lottery winner and you have, the ability to open a dispensary, you don't even get to choose what products are in your shop. They tell you, they give it to you, and then you sell it. So like you said, multi-state operators in North Carolina, they're chomping at the bit for us. We have nothing here, and we've got folks coming up from Florida, California, Colorado, and they're in our politicians' ears saying this hemp space is dirty. They're bad news bears, and, you can't allow this. We'll help you with this program. You don't have to do anything. Just get it voted in, and we'll take over from here. And that's dangerous too, because they're about making the money, and we're on the other side of it. We're about helping the consumer, the healthcare consumers who need the protection from ethical, moral people who want the best for them. And you're fighting an uphill battle with some of these guys and politicians. Just in my state. So our definition of hemp is 0.3% Delta 9 THC by weight. Well, people think that in the hemp space we are exploiting that definition. Well, no, it's just the law. It's how it's written. We're not in the gray. It's actually how it's written. And we're allowed to sell products that would be in Canada in a dispensary. You would have to have a dispensary to be able to sell some of these things. And, politicians thought they were doing something great. And in North Carolina, I don't even know what the industry money value is, but it's definitely in the millions. And if you get a medical program that is designed by an MSO, you're essentially cutting out one of the number one crops in North Carolina. Agricultural is the number one moneymaker for our state. And that's like a big chunk of it, because a lot of these farmers that potentially were going to lose their farm jumped into the hemp space. and were told to grow it, grow it, grow it. And then that contributed to the uneducated drying and curing process. You got tobacco barns filled with moldy cannabis and or hemp, and nobody wants it. And, you know, where does that line get drawn, and where do you go from there, you know, nationally even? I mean, it's going to have, I feel like states may have to do something, even if federal legalization happens. I think each state should be kind of in charge of what they allow and what they don't. I mean, I love that there's caps on how many milligrams are in packages, but like some of them are really ridiculous. We had purchased a gummy rope, like one of those nerds rope, early on in 2019, and the package said 500 milligrams of THC, and it was Delta 8 THC. And, you know, a bunch of us took a little nibble on it, and we're like, holy cow, like, this is bizarre. It is so intense. Like, and we tried to even take a small enough dose. Some of us were just eating a nerd off of the rope. And because how do you calculate that milligram dose? It's 500 milligrams in this tiny little candy. So we sent the rest of it to the lab, and, you know, maybe an inch was taken off of this rope. We sent the rest to the lab. It was 1,135 milligrams of Delta 8 THC. So,
wow.
So, you know, usually people are lying that it was more than it is, because they do that too. Well, they'll say like, I've got a 20 milligram gummy. Let's say it's 30. But this was double the amount. So standardization, I mean, even if we were to do it, there's still going to be, you know, little pockets of disruption, but really getting down to it, it's a matter of you, me, Wes, you know, talking to healthcare consumers, telling them to get educated. And if you don't know where to go, the ACNA is here for you to educate you and to get nurses on board, and, you know, to meet people where they're at in their consumption. Inhalation is great. It only lasts for so long. So being a stacker, you might need a gummy, you might need a beverage, you might need a topical, different products to extend the relief that you're seeking. And, you know, without that education behind it on where to get these safe products, I mean, even companies like Charlotte's Web changed over time. Like they have a great product. They were helping little Charlotte through her epilepsy, and then they needed to find a new formula. I mean, and that was a company that is well known, that knows what they're doing. They did all the safety precautions, they did all the regulations, all the testing, and it still was not as effective. You had to move in shakes. Staying up to date on those things too is going to be really tough. I mean, majority of the population in our country, they're just following the trends. They're seeing cannabis products on TikTok. They're, you know, getting a hold of whatever, and they're okay with it. So we have to change that. And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, when you figure that out, let us know, because we're still dealing with it, right? And it's not to poo-poo on the black market or the illicit market or the,
no.
You know, the legacy market, as we like to call it. There are good operators in that market, but there's also a lot of bad ones. And I think that, you know, to a lot of the points that you've made is at least just know where it's coming from. And if, you know, and I think that's the hardest challenge is, you know, in the illicit side, in that legacy side that still exists, it's exactly as you spoke to, is, you know, regulated companies, at least here in Canada, and I know some in the US as well. I'm, you know, friends with the creators of Dabstract. They're spending millions and millions of dollars on their equipment to ensure that their formulations are accurate, they're tested, even if they're not tested and, you know, where are the heavy metals and that sort of thing. They at least understand milligrams per gram, how much are you consuming, and that there's a very small tolerance there. Where on the other side, in the illicit, it's make some can of butter, I've got some distillate, I'm throwing it in, I think this amount, yeah, okay, that should be about right. And then all of a sudden you end up with double the potency, right? And, or, you know, half. But in typical cases, we see is the consistency across, say, a chocolate bar. One square may not be the same as another. And then all of a sudden you're, you know, doubling down or stacking, as you would say. So yeah, it creates a lot of issue. But we obviously know that this industry is not without challenge, but that's also opportunity. And it sounds like, you know, you're in a great spot to be in right now, because everyone needs to be educated. So, and for us, we just continue to push the bar as much as we can and help, you know, have conversations like this and get information out there. We'll ensure that we share the information of how people can interact and find more education resources from the ACNA. But other than that, I mean, any final thoughts, anything you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I just want to thank you guys for doing what you do. I think it's really important. You made this a fun experience, and I hope other viewers will enjoy it too, and keep subscribing to your channel, because the information is so important. We have to get it out there in order to, maybe we'll change a mind and maybe we won't. But at the same time, at least we're educating on some level where people might say, oh, I should probably think about where I'm getting my cannabis from. My grandmother doesn't need a dab. Maybe she needs a little full spectrum tincture, and it might change a little from the bud tender side. It may be industry wide. It would be really cool to have a cannabis nurse in every company that sells cannabis, or at least some sort of educated healthcare professional that has more than the 10 hours that they're required to have a year to maintain their recommendation for their license. Because, there's a lot of prescribers out there that, may understand that their patients have a condition that may benefit from cannabis, but then that's all they have to give them. They just say, okay, well, you fit this bill, so in our medical program, you can get a card. And then they're left, to their own devices to figure out how to use this. So, I would love to see a cannabis nurse in every dispensary across the world. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. It would be awesome. Well, Nicole, we thank you for joining Legacies with all of your knowledge, because this is an area that I love to hone in on. But we appreciate your time. We know that you guys got a lot on the go. Many people to educate.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thanks for joining us, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Breadstack e-commerce. It might be time to upgrade.
Well, Wes, I think we need to continue to bring more healthcare professionals on. I didn't know where to stop. I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm going, okay, like, I don't think, how far are we? About 2.5 hours full episode, 3 hours, but.
Well, I found that really interesting for one reason. When I go back to just a couple episodes ago when we had Dr. Ira Price on, and he was reflecting on how much of a struggle it is to not just educate consumers and patients, but to get other doctors and nurses and stuff on board with his vision of this can be something, like we need to do something about this and educate people properly. And there's still such a stigma attached to it. And then you see what the ACNA is doing, and people like Nicole. It's really encouraging to see that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think amazing. So I didn't know that we have Canadian nurses also part of that. So let's do some research and we'll give them a shout out as well on this, because it's awesome. I mean, early days, obviously I was a lot closer with some of the nurses that were doing the education. And I've said this before, it seems like we're withdrawing a little bit from the medical side of cannabis. We know that it's still needed, it's still prominent in platforms like Mendo and, some of these others that exist. Great. But there's fucking issues, and people need to be aware of the issues of cannabis consumption. It's not just all, hunky-dory, hold hands, kumbaya around the fire, and then we go for a surf. Like, it's not that. We need to be mindful. And I think that's the thing, is understand where your product, if anything, understand where your product is coming from. And on that side of it, Health Canada, help us. Help us to help consumers understand more about where their products are coming from. Allow a QR code, allow something to scan where, this is produced. You may purchase it one time, but at least then right? Or ask your bud tender to pull it up, or do some research before you go in. Anyways, great time, great chat with Nicole. During this call or episode, there was something posted that you brought to my attention that we definitely need 100% to discuss, which is...
because if this had come in 20 minutes later, we probably would have missed it. So I'm glad we got it in today. But I saw it from Mr. Kip Rowe of Victoria Cannabis Company. Obviously, there's a huge a number of companies under here, but they have just posted their petition that they'd like everyone to sign if possible. So if you head over to the bccannabis.alliance.com, bunch of information there on what they're fighting for, what their mission is, basically around some of these proprietary fees that the BCLDB are imposing and things like that on their cannabis, how much of that, that excise tax breakdown and all that stuff. But
we need to put it up on screen if you're able to do that, because we've talked about this with various individuals across the industry before, which is, it may have been Jonathan or someone else that talked about using like a sticker that you would use at a gas pump to understand where your money is going. So just to quickly break it down, in this case, they've referenced general emission product. It's bake sale, 28 gram SKU. BC's best-selling 28-gram flower. Okay, unfortunately for general admission or decibel in this case, they're making 18% of the overall what the customer pays at $81.76. Sales tax, we're not ever getting away from that. Okay, $8, $8.76. Subtotal though, before that was $73. So out of the $73, only 18% or $14.61 is going back to the producer. That's fucking shameful. Okay,
Outrageous.
the retailer makes 29%. Okay, a little bit higher than standard, I think, in typical CPG. Again, arguments on both sides. CPG versus cannabis. Okay, not quite the same. But by the time the BCLDB puts their markup on it, the retailer is paying $49. So out of all of this, guess who's at the top? As you can see, it's probably on screen now. The government is making an astronomical amount in taxes. Excise tax is $28 of that, right? In other words, the government takes 53% of every dollar the consumer pays. What's Ontario? We're going to focus on BC for right now, but everyone, head over to the website, sign the petition. This is fucking bullshit. Okay? That's all I have to say about it.
100%.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next week on Legacies. Maybe. Wait, dressed up? Is it next week that...
Let's see. Next week will not be the dressed up episode.
Okay, I got time to get a costume
We got
together.
time.
Yeah,
We got time.
What if I wear a mask? Figure it out.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Anyways, see you next week, everyone.